Well, as you can tell, it is 7 o'clock. Isn't that a wonderful chime that we are lucky to have in our city? Um, just a part of the culture that we enjoy here. So thank you for being here, August the 27th. We've been gone for a few weeks. Please hold the applause. Uh, but we are back, and we're back here for a couple of reasons. One, the chambers, uh, we have done kind of a rehab there, and it's just about done, but not quite done. And then we thought that due to some of the topics that we're going to be talking about tonight, that it would be wise to have it here. So thank you for coming, for engaging, and hope that you'll learn a lot. Please turn off your phones or any devices that make sound. We would appreciate that. Madam Clerk, the council is all here, accounted for, and so thank you to each of them for finding their way back from their summer break. We always start off with prayer and the pledge. The pledge tonight will be given by, or will be led, and we can join him by John Geary. John is coming up. And after we stand and he shares the pledge with us, then Pastor Dom from the Alliance Church, which is right across the street from us, will lead us in a wonderful prayer. So if you could, please stand.
Everybody could place your hand over your heart. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Heavenly Father, we come to you tonight in prayer for the city of Glendora, its leaders, and its people. Lord, I thank you for providing all of the resources that the city needs in order to function properly and care for its people. You truly are the giver of every good and perfect gift. We thank you, Lord, for the police, the firemen, municipal workers, these council members, and our mayor, who have been faithful stewards of what you have entrusted to them. Lord, as we gather here tonight to discuss the affairs of Glendora, I ask that you would bless everyone in attendance with speech that is gracious and seasoned with salt. Lord, I ask that you would give these council members all of the wisdom and discernment that they need in order to make decisions that will be honoring and glorifying to you. As your word says, if anyone lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach, and it will be given to him. Lord, I pray that Glendora would be a city that desires and pursues righteousness, for you love those who pursue righteousness. Father, I ask that you would bless this city and all those who live and work here, and that everything discussed tonight, every decision made, would be pleasing to you. For it's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you for that. We appreciate that. Is there anyone that wishes to reorder the agenda or add anything to it? I hope you won't add anything to it. No? Okay, let the agenda stand as is. We will now go into our public comment period. For those of you who wish to speak, please, where are the yellow cards? They're right up here, kind of out of sync, and I think we have some back there at the city clerk's table. Please fill that out, and I'll be giving you a call to come up and speak. Please adhere to the time frame that's on the screens. Address the comments to me. Be kind and show grace. And with that, we will start. First one up is Valentine Rangel, if I got that right. Sir, want to come up and speak? Okay. Is there anybody here that would interpret? and Moises is going to assist. And we appreciate you being here, sir. So
Um, Gentleman lives on Bonita. He's heard about the city's plans of a project at Dale, the Dale site that we've talked about. Has some concerns related to the idea of homeless housing at that location. He has concerns with a potential project to house homeless people there. He's concerned with the activity happen in that neighborhood, affect his families. And he's expressed what he's seen and heard where these types of projects have been built in other locations. Also expressing concerns about traffic related to the project. He shared that people travel at a high rate of speed on those streets. Those streets aren't meant for that. There's a lot of kids in the neighborhood who play in that area. And so he'd like to explore possibilities to address some of them. Express gratitude for giving me this opportunity to share his opinion on the project.
thank you, sir. We appreciate you being here. All right. Next speaker is Raymond Rangel. So Moises? Sure. We're here to help and assist and serve. So we're just happy that you're here.
This gentleman also lives on Bonita in that same neighborhood. He's also wants to share and express his concerns with any homeless related project on that site. He indicated that it's a very safe neighborhood and would like for it to stay a very safe neighborhood. He's also expressing concerns with the street trees. He indicates that they haven't been trimmed in quite a while. He's actually trimmed them on several occasions, sweeps up all the foliage. He also expressed some concern with some of the damage that the street tree, sidewalk, and surrounding infrastructure. He's also expressing concern relative to residents at the end of Bonita that has a lot of vehicles and they park on the sidewalk and kind of on the curb in that area, close to the bar in that neighborhood. Folks doing auto repair on the street. He's also expressed concern with the rate of speed that vehicles travel on Bonita. Said there's been a handful of close calls and in some instances, pets who have been run over by speeding vehicles. Thank you. That was it.
Thank you. Thank you for both of you for being here. Okay, the next one is Michael Lancy. Michael, welcome.
Having a good evening. My name is Mike Lancy. I live at 1733 Dale Road. Looks like 1762 is getting a lot of attention tonight. I took a look at, I just wanted to kind of throw in my 2 cents. I took a look at the presentation I think was going to be presented tonight. It's item 13 on the agenda.
Yes, correct.
And I just want to put my 2 cents in. I thought that option 1, scenario 2, looking at the different options that we had, I think that would be the most compatible. Options 2 and 3, I agree with the gentleman here. I just don't think that it would work. I think it would be overkill for that particular property. I won't go into the details of the how and why, but I just really felt that option 1, scenario 2 would be the best for the neighborhood, given that we have to do something with the property. So I just really wanted the council to really take a look at that seriously as a solution. You know, I know there's going to be a lot more talking going on down the road about this, but when you all take a look at that, I just really like you to really kind of take that into heart as one of the locals. I think that would be a win for everybody, I think, comparing it to the scenarios that we had. So that's it. That's all. I just wanted to put that in. Questions?
No,
okay.
we will, during this period, it's the people's chance to talk, and then we will respond when I close this session.
Oh, okay.
So,
All right.
okay.
Good deal.
Michael,
Right.
thank you.
Thank
We appreciate you being here. Okay, the next speaker card that I have is Gary. I am struggling on this last name. Manman? Gary? Sure. Welcome, Gary.
My name's Gary Mammon. I live on 1735 South Prospero Drive, around the corner, right off of Bonita. Yeah, I'm aware of the traffic. I've lived there 50 years. My wife's been there and her family for 57. Raised all my children there. My daughter came home with her 3 kids. We raised them there. And now I've got a great granddaughter living in my home as well. And this is an established neighborhood with a bunch of good people in it. Now we have newer people here, but most of the people in my direct area lived there a long time. We have concerns. You know, we have safety concerns. It's getting more and more dangerous for us to enter and exit our own neighborhood. There's collision after collision after collision in on Bonita and Arrow Highway. And this council and the mayor should be aware of it because Ruben Hoyo Auto Repair sent you many videos of it. When you had the when you had that review for the beautification of Arrow Highway, you had a gentleman by the name of Warren Burton who lived in Bonita Estates tell you expressly that you needed to have a traffic light put there. And also Reverend Dave Johnson of Neighborhood Christian Church recommended that a traffic light be put there. Now what you did was you painted you painted a do not block on the street. Woo-hoo. You know, that does, most people don't pay attention to it. And when the people are stopped there, inadvertently, somebody at a high rate of speed decides to make the shoulder a passing lane. Now they want to make it a passing lane to turn and on Barranca, and this is where the accidents occur. They occur repeatedly at Bonita and Arrow. People entering and exiting, getting T-bone there all the time. And we really do need a light right there. We need a light there so we can enter and exit that neighborhood safely. We also would like to have one considered on Laxford and Grand, because that too is getting harder and harder to get in and out of. And people are constantly using that for a turnaround, even though it's clearly marked no U-turn there. You know, and since the cemetery, Oakdale is set there and their hedges are so high, people have to encroach on the road in order to be able to see to get out of the neighborhood, you know? And maybe you might want to consider putting a few speed bumps down Laxford, Benzino, and Bonita, since people use this for a throughfare for their cars. They don't live in the neighborhood. The ones that are speeding in the neighborhood, for the most part, don't live in the neighborhood. They don't care about the children that live there. They don't care about the seniors that live there or their general populace. You know, they're just trying to get from point A to point B. I don't think they're trying to disrespect us in any way, shape, or form. It's just that, you know, people are people.
Thank
Yeah.
you, Gary.
I appreciate
Thank
you
you.
guys taking your time to consider my concerns.
We
Thank you.
will. Thank you. Thank you. Well, those are all of the cards I have. Is there anybody else that has come in that would like to speak? That would, sir, why don't you just come up and state your name, and then when you're done, if you could get a card and just fill it out, then that'd be great.
Yes, sir.
Sir,
My name is Jonathan Sandoval. I live on Millburn.
okay?
I'm a deputy sheriff. I live in the neighborhood right there. I know I saved my pennies to get in the Glendora School District. I finally made it there. We have our 2 kids. Thankfully, our neighborhood is pretty established, as theirs are as well. But I've seen, and it's called a broken window modular. And basically, as soon as you have a sense of graffiti or a weaker presence of healthier people to fight off or deter crime, it will increase. And I know the Dale property was considered for some form of assisted living. That area, you have a lot of establishments there, like a female self-defense class that they have there. They have a Zumba class that participates there. As it is, they live right by the wash, or they work by the wash where that gun store used to be. And you've already seen homeless encampments built there. Same thing with the people that are selling flowers there. They're almost putting out the poor flower shop that was at the corner that I used to surprise my wife with flowers from. And they have taken over that whole area. And what I think is important to understand is that law enforcement in general is already stretched. And as you saw, like there's an example of Aurora, Colorado. The local Venezuelan migrants that came there had taken over the apartment complex and has turned it into their own crime syndicate. They're stealing the rent from everyone. So if we can't control the streets with people selling flowers with city ordinance, I really don't see how we'll be able to protect the senior citizens that are at that house, the homes there. They're already soft targets. That place doesn't look like it's in the greatest shape. The nurses are usually the ones that are speeding through because they're just over it.
Yeah.
And I get that, but I think it is to know that a place like a housing project there wouldn't be adequate. The nurses are already parking on Arrow Highway and the residential area. We already are maxed out with that kind of environment. There's no sidewalks. So you are walking on the street and dodging vehicles. The liquor store right there, and then you have the Hells Angels, a little chapter house that they were, the Mongols, I believe, they were utilizing. The community itself actually had to come and push them out because law enforcement had already tried, but they scoff at it. It's when the community comes together and fights them off, and this is what the city council meetings are for, is to hopefully put legislature in play to avoid issues like this. Because once we have given up that inch, retaking it will be nearly impossible without being tied in litigation. So that was my recommendation to avoid like a housing environment of that nature. As you saw on Laxford and Grand, that restaurant that went under, I went on vacation for a week and came back and it turned into a 3-person encampment utilizing the campsite. And I guess the owner's brother was arrested, so he no longer wanted to help law enforcement. So then we were stuck with city ordinances, and I had to keep calling for the grass being too overgrown. They had just been, and in these unfortunate things is call volume, which forces the hand of larger scale events to move these people. They were just selling drugs there for almost 3 months before we were able to do anything about it. And I'm off duty. I'm just trying to go home and enjoy my dinner and
Sure.
go back to work in 4 hours. I'm not sitting there making phone calls all day long to try to make sure the neighborhood's clean. As it is, there's already graffiti from a Zusa gang that encroached in the area. I'm like, I don't think we're capable of protecting that neighborhood if we put housing for assisted living there.
All right. Thank you, sir. I appreciate you being here. All right, last call. Anybody? Sir, please come up and state your name, and if you could go back to the back desk back there and fill out a card, that'd be great. Oh, you have one.
I did.
Great, thank you.
Yes, my name is Eric Bettelheim, and I have a practice in Glendora, actually very close to this site, Aero Vision Center. Been there for about 10 years. And I took a look at the staff report a little earlier this afternoon. And there's 3 options that are listed. And of the 3, the first, I think, would be the most acceptable for the site. It would be more compatible with the neighborhood. Also, it would not result in ongoing cost for the city going forward. And then the other concern I would have with the transitional element is that, yes, the site would be secured, requiring 24-hour security, but people who are unhoused need to get there. And my concern is that they're going to be, yes, they're not going to be disruptive within this settlement, but they might be when they're around it. So that would be my preference, just as a
All right. Great, thank you. Thank you. All right. Have no other cards, and so we will close the public hearing or the public comment period, I'm sorry, and bring it back to member and staff reports. Karen, do you want to start off?
Mr. Mayor, tonight I would just like to ask that we adjourn our meeting in memory of 2 Glendora residents who have died since our last meeting. One of those, Sandra Bladow, she worked for the County of Los Angeles for more than 30 years. She started out working for the Sheriff's Department and then worked in county finance and personnel. And she also served on our Measure E committee, served with the Library Foundation, gave quite a bit back to the community. And so we would like to remember her this evening. The other Glendora resident, David Petaruto, who a longtime resident, and both David and his wife, Vicki, have been very involved in the community in a variety of ways. When the cold weather shelter used to be in Glendora, he was an intricate part of that, also volunteered in many other ways through his church and other civic organizations. And so tonight I would like to adjourn in his memory as well.
We certainly will. Thank you. And we honor those folks and the lives that they had. Gary? Nothing? Michael?
Thank you, Mendel. I too would also like to close in the memory of Mr. Werner Lund Moeller. Mr. Moeller was born March 2nd, 1923 in Horsen, Denmark. He's a twin. His family had a farm in Denmark, whereupon he had to stop his school when he was 12 years old when his father passed away. He became an apprentice tool and die maker and worked hard and saved money so that he and his wife and daughter could make the trip to California. He loves Glendora, or loved Glendora, and lived here for over 40 years. He passed away on August 13th at 101 years old.
Wow. Good life.
Thank you. That's it.
Michael, thank you. David?
Thank you, Mayor. I want to say welcome back, and I'd like to congratulate the Glendora Chamber of Commerce, the Kiwanis Club, and all the other service organizations that a couple of weeks ago put on a, once again, fabulous flashback weekend and car show and event on the city street. Well attended, and everybody seemed to be having a great time. So thank you, Chamber.
Great, David, thank you. Couple things. School has started, so I hope that you're aware that there are a lot of kids out. Kids are not always as attentive as maybe they should be. And so please keep your speed down, especially during those hours, and be aware that they're out there, and we want them to have a good year. I also would implore parents and grandparents, those that raise our kids, to speak and model love and grace. There is a lot of tough stuff going on with all of the social media that kids have to endure today that I didn't have to endure. And we just need to be kind to each other. And I hope that it starts at, home, and at the civic clubs, and at churches, and at the parks, and everything that they're a part of. So I would hope that that would be the case. I also have some good news, is that, the light on Foothill and Elwood, I have been told, and I'm looking at our Public Works Director, and he's probably thinking, oh, what's he going to say now? But I have been told by a very reliable source that Thursday, that light should be up and running at the latest on Friday of this week, not of next year or
Mostly.
next month.
Mostly.
So we are hoping that that is the case. I know that a lot of us that drive that stretch of road have had to zig and zag and stop when we don't think we should stop, because concrete has been poured and utility lines have been put in, and obviously the lights have been put in. But by the end of this week, that should be a functioning light and intersection. And Bill is nodding, so that is good news when Bill nods in the affirmative.
Mayor,
So,
I'll give you one update though on that light.
okay,
So yes, it will be operational, we think, by Thursday evening, Friday morning. The cameras that will do the automatic sensing will not go in until the following week.
okay.
So it'll be on a standard timing stoplight. So I know we like to make lots of comments on streetlights. So hold those on that intersection for one more week, and then the automatic sensing will kick in.
Mean that Grand and Foothill will have competition?
Yes.
We want you to know that we share your love of some of the extended streetlights that our city has. And so we are working on that. So, and Karen's right, Grand and Foothill, that probably ranks as the top light that the people hate the most within our city. And Bill gets more calls about that, I'm sure, than anything else. So anyway, so that is that. Sure.
If I may,
Sure.
a lot of the comments that were made tonight, we will address when we. But the traffic issues are something that's new. I haven't really heard that before, not a lot of it. So a couple of questions. First off, the location of where Bonita goes into Arrow Highway makes it problematic. I don't think there's any possible way to put a light there because it's too close.
Yeah, we'd have to look a little more into that, but also Arrow Highway is controlled by the county. And so, there's various agreements the agencies have with traffic lights. And so not to make any excuses, but that became a thing. I'm looking at Bill. We have a traffic safety committee that does look at those types of requests that come in. We've done it on a variety of basis. And so we can take a look at that as well. But I don't want to sit here and tell you one thing. You are correct. That's the first time we've heard some of those things, but the items on Harrow Highway that are reported are county.
And that's my next question, because if there is a traffic safety issue where Bonita meets Arrow and there's accidents there, Those get reported to us, or are those gonna get reported to the sheriff?
Probably depends on the side of the road in which it occurs. I know the chief's back there, but we can pull some accident data and see. It would depends where, but city has no control over the sidewalk and street, so anything on Arrow Highway there, but if it was on Bonita or incurred or a ramification of an accident that spilled over there, we would probably get a phone call as well, so.
So in general, if there's an accident somewhere that's covered by the sheriff, are we notified?
Depends on the incident. Chief, you back there? Before I step in something I can't get out of here.
Oh, thanks for the opportunity. Yeah, you're tracking 100%, right, Mr. City Manager? Just a few things that I would add. I already sent, to go back to the first complaint, I sent an email to Extra Patrol for 8 and 900 West Bonita because I had not heard recently of those speeding complaints. So I already sent an email out to our whole PD staff to Extra Patrol that area and included that some pets were hit. So that's something that I haven't heard recently. So all of our staff is aware of it now, or as soon as they check their email. Regarding the Traffic Safety Advisory Committee, we haven't looked at those two intersections, both Grand and Laxford and Bonita and Arrow, for some time for traffic flow or problems. So we'll put both those on the list. We'll get the gentleman's information from your yellow comment card, because what we do with that, Bill runs the committee, but we'll check back and probably get some more information from you and consider each intersection. Grand and Laxford is more unique because that's 100% ours. We control both roads. There is a little bit of an issue with Bonita and Arrow because we don't control Arrow. But that's not to say that we can't do anything. We can work with our county partners and Caltrans and different people to see what we can do to help alleviate the intersection. We'll look at it and we'll report back to you with our recommendations or findings or things like that. As far as traffic collision and reporting, no, it depends where the traffic collision actually occurs. Basically, where a vehicle or something that's qualifies as a traffic collision hits something is where the collision actually occurs. So if it occurs on Arrow, it's not handled by us, it's handled by the county, but we can check and get those statistics from them. We typically go to every traffic collision that's on Arrow Highway, so we're aware of it because we go to see where it is, see if it's in our city, and because it's so close, we want to make sure that it's so close that somebody that's in our community will go and provide first aid, traffic control, make the scene safe, and we can get those statistics from them if another agency ends up taking that report.
Appreciate it, Chief.
Got it.
Thank you, Gary, and thank you, Chief, for being here. And I hope that those people that spoke feel heard. And when the chief says he's going to look into something, he always does. I also wanted to let everyone know that during our break, the council and our city manager and other staff people took a tour of, I believe, 4 different sites in cities that are adjacent to us. So I want you all to really know that we put a lot of effort into whatever we choose to do tonight. This is something that's been weighing heavy on all of us. There's probably not an answer that's going to please everyone, but we are working very hard to make the best choice that we can, and even going out to look at what other towns have done and the projects that they have built, the pros and cons of all of that. So with that, I will see if Adam has anything more to add to either the speakers' thoughts, questions, or anything else that you have.
Just one quick item I know was mentioned on some of the vendors. So whether it's flower vendors or food vendors or flag vendors, in the state of California is legal to do street vending, including food. So there are certain requirements and ordinances, and in fact, the city council requested staff come back and to review its ordinance, and that will occur in September, I believe the first meeting in September. So if you are curious, but a lot of the vending, I think people are surprised to know that it is allowed by right in the state of California. So there are some challenges there with enforcement. We have been doing quite a bit of that in education, and I think we have 10+ permits already for people who are allowed to do that activity. So we will be having that discussion in September. So education is always important on that front. And Mayor, just to echo your comments, I know the Dale item's a little later in this evening's agenda. There are a couple other pretty significant items of people that are waiting for those at the start. So appreciate everyone's patience and assure you that if we need to go back in the even information that's not in the staff report and go back to a community meeting and talk about public safety and those things, staff is prepared to do that as well. So happy to answer any other questions.
Great. Adam, thank you. Danny, anything from the city attorney? Okay, thank you. All right, we will move on to item number 2, and that is, I'm going to invite the city clerk to come up and introduce the recognition of those that were engaged in the I Voted sticker. And they've all done a tremendous job, and I think some or all of them are here. So I don't know who's going to present, but it's yours.
Hello. Good evening, Mayor, City Council members, and all those in attendance. May 5th through May 11th, 2024 marked the 55th Annual Professional Municipal Clerks Week. In celebration of Municipal Clerks Week, the Office of the City Clerk held several events and activities. Events include the City Clerk Cafe, historical document viewing, a voter registration drive, daily clerk trivia questions, as well as coloring and activity sheets. One notable activity was the I Voted sticker event, a first for the Office of the City Clerk. To memorialize this event, each entry has been printed and a limited supply will be made available at all Glendora voting centers. In recognition of their hard work, we would like to extend our sincerest gratitude to each artist. Council members and all those in attendance, I invite you to direct your attention to the monitor so that we may view their original artwork. Artists, when I call your name, please rise so the city clerk may present you with a token of our appreciation. Abigail? Arlette? Tima? Victoria? And Sadie, who excuse me, Sadie, who unfortunately could not be present this evening. Once again, thank you all for your participation.
At this time, I'd like to request that the city council come forward so we could take a picture with all the artists.
All right, well, thank you to each one of them. And this is the year that each of us have the privilege to vote, who are of age and everything. So I would encourage you, if you have not signed up to vote, to do that. It is a very important right and something that we all need to do. So, these folks have encouraged us by their artwork to help us to remember to vote. So thank you.
I gotta just say, I love Charlotte's, you're challenging people with your button. Did you? You're challenging people to get out there and vote, so I appreciate that.
That's great. Okay, we're going to have a very informative, presentation right now. As some of you know, the city often will take time to ask the residents what they think of certain things, and that has just occurred. And we're happy to have the president of True North here, and he is going to take a little bit of time to tell us what the survey that he and his team just did. I believe he's on Zoom. Is that correct?
That is
Dr.
correct.
Tim McLarney. Tim, can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me, Mayor?
Yes, you look and sound great. So, the floor is yours, Tim. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mayor and members of council. Dr. Tim McLarney here, president of True North Research. We are a firm that over the last 22 years has specialized in working with California cities as well as other types of public agencies in the state in using surveys to help them develop a statistically reliable understanding of the communities and the customers that they serve. To date, my business partner and I, working as a two-person team, have designed and conducted over 1,500 research studies for public agencies, and about a third of those studies, about 500, are what we call revenue measure feasibility studies, like the kind of study we're going to be talking about here tonight, where the goal is to understand if it's feasible for an agency to move forward with some type of revenue measure, and if it is feasible, to help them understand how might they go about structuring that measure in a way that it's consistent with the type of measure that their community is interested in supporting. Happy to report that we've had a lot of success over the years doing this type of research. For the measures that we have recommended based on our research go to ballot, 95% were ultimately approved by voters. To date, that's about 35 billion in voter-approved measures at the local level statewide. And so I mention this mainly because as I go through today's or tonight's presentation, or perhaps in response to questions from council, I may make reference to how the results we're seeing here compared to what we typically see. And I just want you to have a sense from the experience base from which I'd be speaking. I also welcome questions from council as I go through the presentation or at the end, whichever is your preference. Okay, so next slide, please. So before we discuss the results, it's helpful to review the purpose of the study as well as the methodology. In terms of the purpose of the study, as a revenue measure feasibility study, we're really just trying to address 3 bullets that you see here on the slide. The first is to answer that basic question of, is it feasible? And what I mean by that is if the city were to pursue a bond measure, does it have a reasonable chance of success? Answer that question isn't always yes, right? Sometimes we look at the data and there's just not a clear path to get you from where you are today to where you need to have a reasonable shot at success on election day. And I'll be the first person to tell you that, if that's the case. If we do see feasibility, that second bullet kicks in gear, which is to understand how might you go about structuring a measure in a way that is consistent with the type of measure that your community is interested in supporting. There's a lot of components to a bond measure. There's the overall bond amount, the underlying tax rate. There's the types of projects you would intend to fund if the measure were approved by voters. There's the accountability provisions that can be built in to a measure. So there's questions of election timing. There's all these sort of components to a bond package. The survey can help guide that. And then thirdly, it's an opportunity for us to understand the role that information plays in shaping voters' opinions about your proposal. And that in turn can help with understanding, what sort of communications are needed to help voters come to a well-informed decision about the proposal. So next slide, please. In terms of the methodology, as a revenue measure feasibility study, the first question we always want to ask ourselves is, what election are we considering putting this measure on? Different elections have different turnouts, right? And as you expand or you shrink turnout, you often will get a very different profile to the electorate that's going to participate in that election. And so in this case, the time that we did the study, which is back in May, we were looking at a potential November 2024 measure. And so we chose that November 2024 electorate as the universe from which we'd be sampling. That is the largest turnout of any election in a 4-year cycle. Why? Because the president is on the ballot. They're what's called presidential general elections. You tend to have the highest turnout and participation in those types of elections. So once we identified the individuals who we would expect to cast ballots in that November election based on when they voted, when they registered to vote in the city, what elections they've taken advantage of or participated in since that point, as well as some other demographics. We use a process called stratified and clustered random sampling to choose a sample of voters for our survey that is in fact representative of that likely November universe on all the dimensions that we know tend to drive how voters behave when it comes to revenue measures. So the balance in our sample by age, by gender, by partisanship, by household party type, as well as where they live in the city, that balance matches the balance that we see in that overall likely November universe. Once we pulled our sample, we used 3 different recruiting methods: email, text, and telephone. Everything's PIN protected so that only those individuals that are randomly sampled to participate in the study can access the site, and they can complete the survey one time only. We give folks the option of participating either by telephone or online, whichever was their preference. We wound up doing 600 completed interviews for this study, which is a little more than what you would normally do for a community of your size. But we did that in part because we wanted to do what's called a split sample. As you'll see here in a few slides, we were testing 2 variations on a bond measure. And the best way to do that is to split your sample so that half of your sample gets one version, half gets the other, rather than trying to share both versions with the same respondent. That tends to lead to what we call measurement error. And so in order to accommodate that split sample, we went with an overall sample of 600 completed interviews. That gives, for questions that are common to both sides of that split, that gives us an overall margin of error plus or minus 4% at the 95% confidence level. Okay, next slide, please. So on to the results. We open up the survey with a few what I call warm-up questions. They're designed to kind of get folks into the groove of taking the survey, thinking about their local community before we address the revenue measure questions. And so the first of those simply asks them to rate the overall quality of life in Glendora on this scale of excellent, good, fair, poor, very poor. As you can see here, residents of Glendora have a high opinion of the quality of life in the community. We had 86% rate the quality of life as excellent or good, 12% fair, and less than 2% used poor or very poor to describe the quality of life in the city. We tend to find, by the way, this is not just a warm-up question. We often find that communities that have a high opinion of the quality of life in the community are also the types of individuals that are willing, usually a little more willing to support revenue measures that are designed to sort of sustain or support that quality of life. So after the quality of life question on the next slide, we also ask folks if they could change one thing. So if we go to the next slide, if we could change one thing to make Glendora a better place to live, what change would they like to see? This is what we call an open-ended question, meaning we got to ask the question. We didn't present them with the list of issues you see here. We simply let respondents tell us in their own words what change they would like to see to improve the quality of life in the city. We went back and reviewed those verbatim responses and then grouped them into the categories you see here. So at the top of the list, you see improving, maintaining infrastructure and roads. About 18% mentioned that. Addressing homeless issues, about 17% mentioned that as the top issue. We had about 17% who said no changes are needed, everything's fine, or they couldn't think of a change, right? So nothing really came to mind. And then beyond that, you see an interest in more restaurants and shopping opportunities, as well as improving public safety and security and beautifying, cleaning up the city. And the next slide is the last of the warm-up questions. We went on to ask them, generally speaking, are they satisfied or dissatisfied with the job the city of Glendora is doing to provide city services? Now, because we're asking them to comment on the city's performance overall, right? We're not zeroing in on streets and roads or public safety or a more narrow topic. This can be thought of as sort of an overall performance rating for the city. And overall, we have 83% of respondents say that they were satisfied with the city's performance. You had about 14% who were dissatisfied and about 4% who were not sure or prefer not to answer. I get to ask this question for a lot of cities around the state and have done so for more than 2 decades. And I can tell you that in the current environment, if you're operating in the 80s, you're doing really well, right? There's very few, I struggle to think of the last time I worked with a city where they were able to hit like a 90 or like a low 90s. For the most part, what you're seeing is your higher performing cities are operating somewhere in sort of the mid 80s range to maybe high 80s. Okay, so after these warm-up questions on the next slide, we get right down to business with what we call the initial ballot test. And the idea behind the initial ballot test is before we get any deeper into this interview and we start talking in more detail about possible tax rates that could be associated with a bond, how the funds could be used, or presenting arguments pro and con, we want to present to respondents a mock-up of what we think that 75-word ballot statement could look like if council were to move forward with a bond measure on a future ballot and get their reaction. The initial ballot test is a really good gauge of where your voters are at on the natural with respect to this proposal because they haven't heard anything more about this measure beyond what you see here on the slide. And as I mentioned at the outset, we use a split sample. So this first ballot statement is for a broader facilities bond. So as you can see here, it's meant to repair and expand and make upgrades to a number of different facilities that are in the community, including the library, senior center, teen center, city hall, police and public works facilities, et cetera. This bond was set at $150 million, so it's the larger of the two that we're going to be talking about tonight, with a tax rate of $48 per 100,000 of assessed value, raises about $9 million annually. And so that's the language for the facilities bond. On the next slide, same basic exercise here, only this is the library version. So this is a more narrow bond that focuses exclusively on improvements to the Glendora Library. It has a lower price tag of $70 million compared to that broader facilities bond, which is $150 million, which allows it to have a lower tax rate of $25 per 100,000 of assessed valuation. So that's the ballot language that was tested for the respective measures. And if you go to the next slide, are the results of the initial ballot test. So on the left is the facilities bond. For the facilities bond, we had a majority of respondents, 53% say they would support this proposal. You had 37% opposed. You got about 11% who were unsure. The narrower library bond didn't test quite as well. It had 45% support, 43% opposed, and about 12% unsure. I will tell you that all of the things being equal, what we tend to find is broader measures tend to test better than narrower measures, right? Because, if it's a library measure, someone has to be, have a certain passion or interest in the library for it to have a strong appeal. Or if the facilities measure, if the library is not my deal, but I, am concerned about, say, the, community center or senior center, there's a little more there that allows me to kind of, I might find more attractive. And so in general, we tend to find this pattern is the case. So the one thing you'll note, though, is under current law, for a bond measure to be successful for a city or a special district, it requires 2/3 support. And so at the initial ballot test, both of these ballot tests are short, obviously, of the 2/3 threshold required for passage. Next slide, please. So after the initial ballot test, we dig into what we call the tax threshold section. The idea here is we're going to make it really clear that bonds mean taxes, just in case they didn't pick that up in the 75-word ballot statement. And we also want to understand how sensitive voters are to different tax rates that could be associated with these measures, as well as how you talk about the tax implications of a bond. So in this first slide, and this one's for the facilities bond, we presented 3 different possible tax rates: $48 per 100,000 of assessed valuation, $38 and $25 in that order in what's called a Dutch auction, to see how at each one of these rates, how much support we could find among your respondents. And so you can see here that, when you zero in on the tax rate and focus voters' attention on that, we are seeing some tax rate sensitivity, right? At the $48 per 100,000 of assessed valuation rate, support dipped down to 39%. As you lower the rate, support ticks up, such that at $25 per 100,000, you get about 52% support. Same exercise on the next slide, only this is for the library. Now, we saw at the outset that the library had a lower bond amount, but it also found less support than the facilities bond. And so here we're testing a little different range of tax rates from $25 per 100,000 of assessed down to $14. But you can see that even though these are lower rates, we're seeing a little less support here than we were for the facilities measure. That's because, again, the narrower measure overall wasn't as attractive overall. And so support ranges from 30% to 39%, depending on that price tag. Now, one of the things we know about this question, the way we present it, is that it tends to be a pretty conservative read on support for a bond measure for a couple of reasons. The first is we are putting the blinders on a respondent and we are focusing their attention on the price tag, right? When you look at the 75-word ballot statement, that proposal, the price tag is one of the items included in that 75 words, but also included is all the things you're planning to do with the bond, right? So it's a package deal. By plucking out the price tag, setting it aside, and kind of focusing voters' attention on it, it tends to have a bit of a wet blanket effect on support. This is the case always when we're testing bond measures, but that's one of the reasons why we know that this threshold question tends to be a bit of a conservative read. The other reason it's a conservative read is because when I say, you know, if you knew the property taxes on your home would increase by $25 per 100,000 of assessed valuation, not everybody knows what you're talking about, right? You have to know what assessed valuation means. You have to have some estimate of what the AV is for your property. You've got to be able to do math in your head in the space of the interview pretty quickly to come up with, to translate $25 per 100,000 of assessed valuation into a meaningful number. And understandably, not everybody's good at that. And so we know that there's a certain percentage of people that when we ask this question, they tend to hedge. They will say no or not sure instead of yes, because they know you're talking price tag. They don't know what it adds up to. And that's why on the next slide, we come about it a little differently. We say, all right, this is for the facilities version. Let me put it another way. If you knew that this measure would cost the typical homeowner $227 per year, would you vote yes or no? The $227 per year is the $48 per 100,000 assessed valuation tax rate multiplied times the median AV for a residential property in the city. So it's what that middle property owner would pay, or the median property owner would pay. And you can see that when you go ahead and do the math for folks, and you turn that sort of, you know, mysterious tax rate into an actual number that everyone can understand, it has a positive impact on support for the proposal. So at the $48 per 100,000 of assessed valuation tax rate for the facilities bond, we had 39% support. On the left column, when you translate that into $227 per year, support bounces up to 48%. On the right column, same exercise, only here we're testing the low $25 per 100,000 of assessed valuation tax rate for the facilities measure, which translates to $118 per year. And here we're seeing you've got support at around 54%. So point of this is when you're able to take that sort of mysterious tax rate, turn it into a number that everyone can understand, you tend to see that support goes up a bit. Same exercise on the next slide, only this is for the library bond. You can see here again, the support levels are lower still with the library bond, but here again, we're seeing that translating the tax rate into an actual annualized total has a positive impact on support for the proposal. So, and I'll just show the left column here, the 118 per year, that's the $25 per 100,000 assessed valuation tax rate, which we found 30% support for the library bond. When you translate that to 118 per year, you get 41%, right? Okay. All of this is information, by the way, that is helpful for kind of understanding where you price a bond, right? It's not just the aggregate bond amount, it's really that underlying tax rate that voters tend to key off of. So next slide, please. So after the tax threshold section, we jump into what we call the projects and improvements section of the survey. And here we're trying to do two things. One is we are now going to start to educate this respondent more about what this bond measure would accomplish by unpacking that 75-word ballot statement, right, into all of these discrete project areas. And in this way, by doing so and sort of elaborating on what the bond, how the bond funds could be spent, you're giving them a much better idea about what this proposal is about. The other thing it allows us to do is understand of all the ways you could spend bond money, how do voters feel about each of those projects, and which of these ultimately rise to the top of the list in terms of their priorities. So in terms of the facilities, bond, what you see here at the top of the list are really sort of three project areas that sort of stand out from the rest as being the priority. Top one here is just basically bringing your older facilities up to current codes, right? Current building codes, safety codes, proper access for seniors and those with disabilities. Second item there is basic repairs, right? You have older facilities, got problems with leaky roofs, faulty electrical, heating and HVAC systems, aging infrastructure. So it's using bond funds to address those issues. And then the third one is removing hazardous materials, right? Anytime you have older facilities, when you're going in and having to, do renovations or remodels, you're going to encounter things like asbestos, lead pipes. Voters like to see those things gone. So those are the top three priorities among the ways you could spend the money on the broader facilities. Everything on the list, though, had a majority of respondents saying that they would, either strongly favor or somewhat favor spending some of the bond proceeds on that item. Next slide, please. So somewhat different list for the library, obviously, but what is interesting is the top two here that stand out are basically the same top two for a facilities bond. It's making sure that the library meets current codes, safety codes, building codes, ADA access, and also fixing basic problems like leaky roofs and faulty electrical and HVACs and aging infrastructure. So next slide, please. If the council were to move forward with a bond measure, there's going to be an election cycle. And during that election cycle, there's going to be a lot of discussion and debate about the proposal, right? In the community, you'll have advocates who will step up and argue to their friends and neighbors about why this is needed and why they should vote yes. You might also get some opposition. People step up, say it's a terrible idea, shouldn't be doing it, and here's why. For this survey to be a reliable gauge of the feasibility of a potential bond measure, we need to simulate that discussion debate in the space of the survey, so we understand not only where are your voters on the natural, which was that initial ballot test, but what happens to their opinions about this proposal once they're exposed to arguments pro and con, much like they will be in an election cycle. And so we do that by simulating that discussion with positive and negative arguments in the space of the poll. In this slide here is the positive arguments we tested for the facilities bond. The nature of the question is supporters of a measure say blank, you insert a positive argument, and we ask them, do they think it's a very convincing, somewhat convincing, or not at all convincing reason to support the proposal? And what you see sort of, all of these arguments get a bit of traction. At the very top of the list, though, the two that step out from the rest are, the top one is just basic accountability provisions that could be built into a bond measure like this. So you can have, a project list detailing how the money is going to be spent, citizens oversight committee to monitor the city's expenses, and that way public disclosure of how all monies are spent. And so there's a certain number of voters out there who, although they might find see a need for these types of improvements, they also don't trust government, right? And so having these types of transparent accountability provisions built into a measure sort of gives those voters the assurances that if they vote yes, their money is going to be well spent. Second item there just talks again about, it's a little bit of an education item on helping them understand, due to the age of facilities, they have a number of structural problems. You've got earthquake safety issues, you've got outdated electrical, plumbing, and roof leaks that can cause water damage and mold, and that the measure is really designed to fix those types of problems as well. So those are the positive arguments for the facilities bond. On the next slide is the similar set of arguments for the library. Here again, though, it's interesting that the top two arguments are the same for the library as they are for the facilities bond. It's sort of helping voters understand the status of your facilities, your older facilities, and some of the issues they have, as well as the accountability provisions that can be part of a potential measure. So now at this point in the survey, voters have heard a lot more about this proposal than they did at the initial ballot test. On the one hand, we talked about the tax rates, right? And as we saw, that had a real chilling effect on support for the proposal, right? Because we're zeroing in on the price tag. But we had a chance after that to also talk in more detail about how the funds could be spent. We conveyed positive arguments on behalf of the proposal. And so we circle back on the next slide with what we call the interim ballot test, where we present that same 75-word ballot statement again, and we say, now that you've heard a bit more, where do you stand? And what you see here is that support for both measures when compared to the initial ballot test ticked down about 2 points. So we're at 51% and 43% respectively for the facilities bond and the library bond. That tick down has everything to do with that tax rate discussion, right? As we saw that the moment we start zeroing in on that piece of the discussion, support dropped a little bit or quite a bit. And what's happened is we've sort of dug out of that hole by explaining more about how the funds can be spent and conveying positive arguments, but we don't quite get back to where we started. And then on the next slide, we get into the negatives. And the idea behind the negative arguments is that I want to pressure test respondent support for this proposal by peppering them with a series of negative arguments, the kind of arguments that they would expect to hear from an opponent should the city move forward with a measure and should you get opposition. And so you see here are the arguments we tested for the facilities measure. And some of these negative arguments get traction, right? And the top one just being that the city raised the sales tax 5 years ago, generates about $20 million in extra revenue, and that the city should use that money to fix community facilities rather than asking for another tax. So it's sort of reminding them of a recent tax measure in the city. Next slide is for the library one. The top argument here was a little more generic, just the idea that, hey, everyone's coming after us for taxes. We got the local taxes, state taxes, county taxes, school bonds. There's going to be more on the ballot. So it's sort of hitting that idea that, we just can't keep raising our taxes at every turn. So those were the negative arguments we tested. Again, the design here is to try and put some pressure on respondents to figure out how resilient is your yes vote for these measures. And the answer to that question is on the next slide. So after the negatives, what we see is that support cools down a bit further. We drop about 3 points in response to the negatives for the facilities measure. So we're sitting at about 48% support at this point. And then for the library version, it checks in around 39% support. Okay, so next slide, and this is my final one. So what does all this mean? So I'm going to circle back first to that overarching question I mentioned at the outset as kind of one of the main motivators for doing the research, which is to answer that basic question of, is it feasible, right? If you were to put one of these bonds on a ballot in the near term, does it have a reasonable chance of success? The answer to that is what I call a no but, right? Under current law, which requires 2/3 support for a bond measure that's passed by any entity other than a school district or community college district, I just don't see that there's a path to get you from where you are today to where you need to be successful, right? That 2/3 threshold is a very difficult threshold to achieve. These bonds for your city, like a lot of bonds for other cities, just often can't garner that level of support. And so under current law, no, I don't see that these bonds are feasible. However, this November, there's going to be Proposition 5 on the ballot. And if that were to pass, that's a bit of a game changer. So what Prop 5 does essentially is levels the playing field. So you may know that from Prop 39, a decade so or more ago, lowered the threshold from 2/3 to 55% for school bonds. Voters approved that measure statewide. And that's why around the state, when you look at bond measures, the ones that pass, there are a lot of bonds that pass statewide, but they're almost all educational bonds, right? They're for schools and community colleges because they have a threshold that's more achievable at 55% than 2/3. So if Prop 5 were to pass this November, I think you're going to, for your measure, as well as I think a lot of other city measures and bond measures for special districts around the state, you're going to see a lot of activity for that, because 55% it's not easy to get, but it's certainly a lot easier than hitting 2/3. So having sort of given you the overarching view, I want to dig in on a couple things in terms of the positive signs and the challenges we see in this poll. There are some positive signs in this poll. I mean, we saw that when you ask voters, in an open-ended manner, what's the most, if they could change one thing about the city, what change would they like to see to improve quality of life? Infrastructure was the number one, right? They talked about, sort of taking care of the facilities and infrastructure you have. And so, they understand, many voters understand that need. We saw that the projects, the things that you're planning to do, if you had a successful bond measure, those are popular with your voters. And you've got some solid positive arguments about sort of why this measure is needed and why they should vote yes. So those are some positive things. We also see a number of challenges, right? Particularly that 2/3 threshold, right? That's just a difficult threshold to achieve. And you're not alone as a city in finding that, it's difficult to have a bond measure that can achieve that threshold. There are very few bond measures passed by municipalities around the state under current law. We did see some tax rate sensitivity, so that's something that we'd want to be very thoughtful about if you move forward with the bond. Is there's always this tension between your need is probably here, but with voters' tax rate sensitivity, you'll have to come off that and have a bond that's more modest to be able to sort of live within the comfort zone of your voters. We also saw that the opposition arguments get a bit of traction. About 4 points were knocked off your measures once they were exposed to opposition arguments. And so that's something to keep in mind. That isn't really a big fall. I'll let you know. I get to do this for a lot of agencies around the state. And, a 4% decline is actually a little less than what we normally see when you pepper respondents with negative arguments. And so that's a good thing. Clearly, one of the other challenges, isn't just coming out of the poll, but if you step back from the poll and you think about kind of what our elections have been like the last few years, we're seeing what I would call, a very hyper-partisan environment, much more so than say a decade ago. And we see doing revenue measure research around the state that's usually not very helpful, right? That the more divided we are on a partisan basis, typically that creates an environment that isn't as hospitable to revenue measures as cases where we're not really driven by partisanship. We're thinking, more in terms of our communities. There's also some statewide initiatives and other overlapping measures that you need to be thinking about, right? Sometimes it's not your measure, but it's what your measure is going to be parked next to on the ballot that can create some challenges. And then finally, moving forward, we'll see where this goes. There was a new rule passed for this last year that applies for the first time to these 2024 elections and beyond, which is called AB 1416. And it has to do with below a 75-word ballot statement, leaving space there to list supporters and opponents. Most counties around the state have opted out of this. LA County, Orange County are one of the few that have stayed in. And so it remains to be seen how this sort of impacts voters' opinions about these types of measures. I've done quite a bit of research on this, but I want to see how the November elections play out. But that's also something that can actually impact the support levels for these types of measures moving forward in counties that, stay in on the AB 1416 rules. So I know I've done a lot of talking. That's the end of my presentation. I welcome questions from council if there are any.
Thank you, sir. Very, very good work here that you've shown us. Michael, any questions that you have of Timothy? David, any questions?
Yeah, just one. Looking at the tax rate, if we were to go with a lower tax rate, doesn't that extend the payback period or the payoff period of the bond?
Yeah, it can have a couple of different effects. If you keep all your assumptions the same, like the period and the interest, the AV growth and everything else, what it essentially does is lower the bond amount, right? However, if you wanted to extend a payback period or extend the way in which you draw down bond monies, you can actually lower the tax rate, keep the bond amount the same. It just means it's going to take you longer to access those funds. So it isn't so much extending the payout as it is just you have to wait before you can draw some of these monies down a little longer.
Logically, one of those numbers has to change, either the
Correct.
duration or the amount you generate. So, okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Gary, any questions or comments?
Yeah, I got a couple questions. First off, on the projects and improvements, the questionnaire, I'm just a little bit shocked. We're asking questions about if it's important to the public for us to fix things like leaky roofs and faulty electrical. Have 30% of people saying no. Was the question framed in such a way so that I know the people that said no, they know things like that need to be fixed, and it's just we're all concerned about the outrageous taxes we pay here. But was the question worded in a way that could help explain why 30% of people would not want us to be able to do some of these things?
Yeah, it's in the context of the revenue measure, right? So we phrase it as, if the measure passes, would you favor or oppose using some of the money to, and then you insert your project. Even though we talk about it in terms of if the measure passes, what you tend to find is there's going to be a hardcore no vote built into any community, right, on any measure. And it's those folks who will tend to say, I'm no on this measure. I don't want to see the money spent on anything, right? They just sort of hit the no all the way through the survey. And so I think if those same individuals you came and said, hey, should we be taking care of our facilities like leaky roofs and plumbing and electrical in the, absent and not in the context of a revenue measure, the vast majority of them would say, sure, right? It's just, they understand it's in context of a tax measure that they may not support.
My dollar.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, do it, but not with my dollar.
Well, it's all their dollars.
Yeah,
It's
but
all taxpayer
the
money, no matter
context
what
of
we
the
do.
question, yeah.
But, one of the other things I think it's important that we need to take a look at as a community, that Measure E helped us keep the doors open. When that was passed, we were in a situation, you've probably seen on the news that the city of Orange is going through some real budget issues. They made the decision to eliminate their crossing guards. A lot of cuts because, running deficits for a number of years. So the purpose of Measure E was actually to make sure and keep our services what they were and to start doing some work on streets that we hadn't been able to do for years. So, I think as we continue this conversation going forward, we need to be able to tell that story and we need to make sure the public. I do have another question that came to me as watching the presentation. Is there because let's face it, we all know we're overtaxed. There are people that, an additional tax could break them. And that's understanding. There an ability, and this may be a Dan, is there an ability to do a variable tax rate on something like this?
Not on a bond. A bond is based on the assessed valuation of a property. Now, to some degree, it's already built in. And what I mean by that is, we tend to think of like, who are the vulnerable populations, right? Let's think about your seniors, right, or on fixed incomes. Well, bonds are based on the assessed value of their property, and the assessed value doesn't grow at the rate that market value does, right? And so what you'll tend to find is if you look at the assessed valuation of properties, anybody, I look at my dad. My dad bought his property 40 years ago. His assessed valuation is really low, but his market value is high. He pays about 1/10 the taxes that I do, right? Because I'm younger, I bought my house later, and that's Prop 13 in action. So to some degree, there's already this sort of uneven playing field, so to speak, built in to protect those individuals who wind up, I'm older, I'm fixed income, I can't afford to have my taxes raised. Well, the reality is they're probably, if you have a bond measure, they're going to be paying a lot less on average than the average homeowner because they've had their home a lot longer. They bought it for less. It has the assessed value only can grow 2% a year. So, but beyond that, there's no tiering of a bond, right? There's also no way to, like you'll see sometimes with school parcel taxes where they might have a senior exemption. There's no sort of exemption for a bond. It applies to all properties, commercial as well.
Appreciate that. And I understand the way it works. It's just, honestly, we're in a situation where one additional tax, homelessness is one of the biggest issues that we're dealing with, and we're going to be talking about that later. But tax could create a homeless situation for some of our residents. So it's a tough thing to deal with. It's a conversation that we need to have. And as we move forward with this, we just got to make sure we have an open as to why this is needed, because there are things that, those are my only comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary.
Thank you.
Karen?
Thank you very much for all of the information. It was very helpful. You confirmed some of my assumptions that I had going into this, so thank you for that. And I think based on everything that you shared, that probably your advice to wait till we see what happens with Prop 5 is going to be the best plan of action for us.
Thank you.
Karen.
Let's make one more comment.
Sure.
Sorry. I think we need to make it clear that this is not a conversation for this November election.
That's correct. I was looking at Mendel to make sort of some preamble comments, if you wouldn't mind, Mayor.
No.
All right,
please.
perfect. Evening, everyone. Timothy, always a pleasure to see you. Timothy, he provided us this PowerPoint after he got back from a 100-mile hike along the Muir Trail. So we are envious of you for doing that and appreciate all the hard work. You'll have to let us know if it was worth it. I think just for background and because we have an audience that we don't normally have, the building that you're actually sitting in this evening was subject to a variety of studies, which were shared publicly, both at the library board and at the city council for the structural integrity. The city provided some pretty robust background on how this facility was built, which was bonds prior to Prop 13, when the city could just raise the tax rate and pay back the bonds. Same thing with the police department. There was actually a vote of the people to do that. In fact, there was a vote of the people to build this building that was voted down, and the city was able to raise the property taxes anyway, which is one of the reasons why Prop 13 went into place. Prop 13 is also the reason why a lot of cities don't have newer facilities, because cities lost the ability just to tax and probably for a much needed reason. And so if you're curious on how we got here this evening or why the presentation is there, staff's happy to provide you with a litany of information and background and documents as to why we're having this discussion. And I think through this survey, you sort of see an understanding of the community, and you saw it up front that infrastructure is the number one issue now, overtaking homelessness for the first time in 8 years or 6 years. And so, but still 35% of our population in total is worried about either homelessness or some capital. So these conversations are very important. And it sounds like we'll be looking for some future direction from the council after November, when we're able to understand exactly what the taxing world looks like and really better understand our operations and sort of see what the bond market is as well.
Good. Adam, thank you. Timothy, thank you for excellent work. We appreciate you, and we will be back in touch after we see what Prop 5 does, and assess kind of where we go there. So thank you. Appreciate
Thank
that.
you. Have a great evening.
All right. So just to be clear, so that the record shows, we're not going to have a ballot measure like this, a bond measure to vote on for this year. I want to make sure that the people on Nextdoor know that, and not that any of you are on Nextdoor, but maybe you read it as my wife does, and I want to squelch that that salient piece of information that probably is already out there somewhere, but there's not going to be a bond that we're going to vote on. That does not preclude the fact that, as has been said, that some of the buildings that we've talked about and that we were asking folks to assess are still in great need. So we're going to have to do something, whether it's a cookie sale or a bake sale or something like that. We're going to have to do something at some point to have a makeover of some of these buildings. So, but that'll be for another day. Okay. I know that some of you are here for item 13. Now, this is the way we're going to get through it. There's a consent calendar right now, and is there a second?
I'll second.
So what that means is, by what has been moved and seconded, we're going to approve the items 4 through 11. Boom, just like that. And I see some nods. You're like waking up, or either you're saying way to go. So with that, Madam Clerk, since we don't have our little usual way to vote, would you please call the roll?
Of course, but before I do that, I want to make a correction to the set of minutes for the July 9th. We had to fix the Mayor Pro Tem's last name as well as the attendance title. I just wanted that for the record.
Okay, thank you.
And then for the oral roll call, Councilmember Ellis,
Yes.
Councilmember Boyer, excuse me,
Yes.
Councilmember Davis,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Friedel,
Yes.
Mayor Thompson,
Yes.
motion carries 5-0.
Okay, now we instantly are on item 12. And I know that Kelsey is going to do an excellent job of talking about this. Item 12 is to approve an agreement with Avid Trails LLC for the design of South Hills Bike Park in the amount of $90,500 and provide South Hills Bike Park update. And Kelsey Fay is here to give us that word. So thank you. It's yours.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council. Good evening. Tonight I'll be presenting the award of contract for Avid Trails as well as the South Hills Bike Park update. So in December of 2022, the city contracted with Avid Trails to complete a conceptual design for South Hills Bike Park. This design was completed in May of 2023 and was crucial in enabling the city to apply for a grant through the Office of Grants and Local Services Land and Water Conservation Fund. We continued our partnership with Avid Trails to advance the design process and get a schematic design which was completed in May of 2024. To support this phase of the design, we also contracted with a geospatial firm to conduct a comprehensive land survey of South Hills. Staff is now requesting that the City Council approve an agreement with Avid Trails to move forward with the final design phase, taking us all the way to the preparation of construction documents. These documents will be used for the bidding process to secure a contractor to build the bike park. It's anticipated that final construction documents would be completed by January of 2025. As we were working on the initial conceptual design for this project, the opportunity to apply for the Land and Water Conservation Fund grant administered through the Office of Grants and Local Services came up. We immediately took steps to apply and submitted the application in May of 2023. The design that we had from Avid Trails was crucial in making the application as strong as possible. Thanks to their expertise, we were able to submit a compelling proposal complete with the design and a clear vision for the project. The city was notified in December of 2023 that we had been selected as one of 16 other park projects to move forward with post-selection federal requirements. The proposed grant award is for $1 million for the project that is expected to cost $2 million. One of the post-election federal requirements included a grant boundary map that shows the park area that will be protected in perpetuity for outdoor recreation purposes. Avid Trails has already provided us with a map that's been approved by the Office of Grants and Local Services. Another post-election federal requirement is Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act. Section 106 mandates that we identify and assess the potential impacts of our project on historic properties, ensuring that we consider and respect the cultural heritage of the area. To navigate this process, we've contracted with Duke Cultural Resources Management as our consultant. Duke is responsible for preparing all necessary Section 106 documentation, which includes creating an area of potential effect map, researching known archaeological and historical resources, reviewing prior cultural resource studies, consulting with local Native American groups, and conducting a comprehensive field survey. The anticipated completion for Section 106 study is October of this year, pending comments from local Native American tribes. The last post-election federal requirement is an updated application and revision form. So this form allows the city to go into more detail and specifics on the project, and for the Office of Grants and Local Services to understand the project in more depth. As we progress with the project, we've taken steps to comply with the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA, which is required due to the project size and the necessity of a general plan amendment. To gather the critical information needed for CEQA, we've enlisted the expertise of Alta Planning and Design for preliminary engineering and IMEG Corporation for geotechnical services from the city's master on-call list. Alta Planning and Design is tasked with the preliminary engineering, which includes key elements such as the conceptual grading, drainage design, and low-impact development studies for hydrology and water quality. This work is fundamental in assessing the project's environmental impact and is scheduled for completion by November. At the same time, IMEG Corporation is conducting a geotechnical investigation focusing on subsurface conditions, including soil composition, groundwater levels, and seismicity. These assessments are vital for understanding the site's stability and ensuring it's suitable for the proposed development. IMEG's work is also expected to be completed by November. We recently issued a request for proposal to the city's pre-qualified CEQA consultants. We've received 3 proposals and are in the process of evaluating them to select the best team to guide us through the CEQA process. It's anticipated that this project will result in a mitigated negative declaration. This indicates that while the project may have some environmental impacts, they can be mitigated to a level where they're not considered significant. The CEQA process typically takes about 8 to 10 months to complete, and we'll be working with the consultant that's chosen to ensure the timeline is followed. Simultaneously, we'll be conducting a zone change and a general plan amendment as some of the parcels within the project area require rezoning and a land use amendment is necessary for the general plan. So as of right now, the conceptual, schematic design, and the land survey have been completed. Pending council approval tonight, we're ready to move forward with the final design phase. Section 106 is underway. The tribal consultation letters were sent out to local tribes last week, and they have 30 days to respond with any comments or concerns. The preliminary engineering and geotechnical assessments are in the beginning stages. We anticipate bringing the CEQA consultant agreement to City Council for approval in September. So once we have that consultant on board and all the necessary studies are completed on schedule, we're aiming to release a notice inviting bids for construction in May of 2025, with the goal of beginning construction in September 2025. These timelines are contingent on several factors, including the timely completion of all the studies and the official awarding of the grant from National Park Service. If everything proceeds as planned, we hope to receive the official grant award by May or June of 2025, allowing us to stay on track for the project's construction. So pending the approval of the design agreement tonight, the total amount spent and anticipated for this project right now is $554,110. As of now, we estimate the construction cost to be around $1.5 million. However, the final cost will be determined once we go out to bid for construction. The remaining funds after design and pre-construction expenses will be allocated towards the actual construction, any unforeseen costs that may arise during the process. These funds will also cover the necessary project elements such as contingency planning, final inspections, and potential enhancements to ensure the project meets all required standards and expectations. And this concludes my report. I'm available for any questions.
Elsie, thank you. Excellent job. Questions from the council? Karen?
So obviously, if you could build it tomorrow, that would be great, but understand all of the process involved, especially because of the grant that we're receiving and all the steps that need to be taken. But thank you for sticking with this and finding that grant money and following through on these plans. I know it's going to be a great addition to the South Hills to have that bike park there, so looking forward to it.
Thank you.
Gary?
Question, once construction starts, what's the time to completion?
Yeah, the contractor we're working with or the designer says about 2 to 3 months to build it typically.
Just to share with the public, one of the things so interesting about this, many of you may have done it yourself or your kids may have. Down this an area that some call Honda Hills because kids would go down there and actually move the dirt around and build their own ramps and take dirt bikes down here and ride their bikes around this area. So this project started because of a group of young people that were doing a lot of riding in the South Hills, and they started this conversation. And so it's great to see it come to fruition. And the other thing that's important about this, or it's pretty cool, is the 2028 Olympics, the mountain biking event is going to be held at Pudding Stone at Frank Bonelli Park. So the fact it's going to be right around the corner, and hopefully we'll have this done well before 2028, so it'll bring some interest. Great project. I'm really looking forward to it. Thank you. Great report.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gary. Michael, anything?
Kelsey, wonderful report. I really enjoyed that. I'm looking forward to this. I just have one question. You may not know this, maybe Bill will have to weigh in on it. The original Glendora Avenue or road is underneath that access area, and most people don't know about it. In fact, Gary had alluded me to it when we walked the site. It's covered with dirt right now. Is there any way of memorializing that or kind of part of history? Most people, you might not know that there's actually, they moved that road many years ago, so it's up on the side of the hill, actually, right now, the original road.
I think that road is gonna be our fire access to get in. It will be, the park will sit above that, but the original road is below that as we walk in. So there'll be parking on that and that, so that will all be redone, but it will be part of the way that we get into our parking lot and for emergency access.
So you will be utilizing that road?
Yes.
Is there, just a thought, not making part of the motion, but consider maybe putting some placard up or something like that, that's the original road?
No.
No?
No, it's, I think as we get closer to the finalized project and we get through all those, that's when those types of things come up.
So
But,
it's not a no.
I mean, maybe.
Thank you.
Michael, that's not a bad answer. If history is evident of itself. David?
Thank you, Kelsey. So if I'm hearing this right, our original projected budget was $2 million estimate, and it sounds like we're coming in below that, so. little savings.
Hopefully.
Keep up the good work. Thank you.
Kelsey, this has been great. The only question that I have is what engagement have we had with really the kids and the parents that were up there, as Gary said, in the dark of night, building these hills, and then we discovered that they were doing it, and this has emerged. I mean, have they had any sort of input into what's being made?
Yeah, so I know originally before we contracted with Avid Trails, there was a public meeting where some of those kids came, Trails Council came. We did have Avid Trails at Earth Day a couple years ago, and I know the mountain bike team came and spoke to him. So I know he's tried to incorporate people's comments into that. Um, Other than the kids, we did meet with Trails Council as well to kind of keep them in the loop and show
Good.
them what we're doing. So we're trying to keep everyone in the loop.
I may weigh in on that. Had a meeting at the site. 75 kids and their dad rode their bikes up to the site. Been a lot of engagement.
And is it true that you guys then took a bike and showed them some tricks?
No, we walked very, very slowly.
You were
slowly
walking.
down the hill.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. Well, with that, with that said, is there a motion to approve?
I also
this?
move.
Okay, David made the motion to approve. Is there a second? Michael? Madam Clerk, would you call the vote, please?
Of course. Councilmember Ellis?
Yes.
Councilmember Boyer?
Yes.
Councilmember Davis? Yes. Mayor Pro Tem Friedendahl?
Yes.
Mayor Thompson?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
All right, great. Okay, we're now, yeah, there you go. Okay. So Valerie is ready for the main event tonight, item 13. And it is to look at options for the city-owned property located at 1762 Dale Road. And Valerie, it's a joy to have you here. We've all read the staff report, and you will illuminate that for us now. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and good evening, Council. Good evening, everybody. As mentioned, we are here to have a discussion and present some options on the 1762 Dale site. The property, as you know, was acquired by the city at the end of July last year, and that was in response to the 2022 community survey. which did address or voice that homelessness and poverty was one of the primary concerns of the community. We heard earlier in the True North survey that it is now second, but it's a close second still, a concern that is very much at the top of the list of things that the city should address to improve the quality of life here in the city. So the city acquired the property in July. Since then, the property has been demolished. The development has not yet been determined. We've had ongoing conversations on this. As a reminder, the property was previously an assisted living facility. As I mentioned, it has since been demolished recently. The site is now leveled and vacant. The site is also, as a reminder, identified in the housing element as a site for housing. So something that the city would need to go ahead and provide on this site. And just a reminder, the city's general plan also the state requires that we address housing needs for all income levels. So this is something that would align with the state's policies as well. So late last year, the city did engage with the Regional Housing Trust, and we asked that they conduct a feasibility analysis for different development options. And we came to council in February and presented the results of that feasibility study. And council then directed staff to go back and get some additional information. So we're here tonight to go ahead and provide that to you, but we'll go ahead and give a summary as well as on that feasibility study. I think it's very important that we just have a summary of what was covered. So first, we'll go ahead and take a look at the different housing typologies. This is something called deed restrictive affordable housing. It's permanent affordable housing, as we refer to that throughout the presentation tonight. Permanent affordable housing is going to refer to affordable housing similar to what we have at Elwood, as well as permanent supportive housing. Both of these are deed restricted. They're required to be affordable housing for a 55-year period. The differences are in the targeted households. So with permanent affordable housing, we're targeting households that are low income. That can be up to 80% of the average median income, but 50 to 60% is what's targeted for the highest amount of financing opportunities that are available. This can house large family households. It's an apartment style complex. That's a rental format. And with the state density bonus, this type of product would allow for 36 dwelling units per acre, which puts this site at about 79 units. Permanent supportive housing is, again, similar. It's a rental type product, and it's going to target, however, a lower income individual. That's 15 to 30% of the average median income, and we'll get to what that looks like in a couple slides. But this is going to target special needs individuals. A lot of these people have disabilities, aren't able to work full-time, and need subsidized housing. In other cases, if without it, they may be homeless themselves. So again, it's a apartment style product. Includes supportive services, which may be meals, it may be assistance with health visits. And again, similar, it's up to 36 units per acre with a state's density bonus. So next we'll move on to temporary housing types. You have transitional housing, which could be up to 24 months, but most target 6 to 12 months. In certain cases, they're able to cycle them through quicker. But this is what you see in a lot of the San Gabriel Valley sites. It's the transitional housing that includes a tiny home or a micro unit. And that is going to also include supportive services, help people go ahead and find jobs, get employment, and then transition them into permanent housing. And this, as I mentioned, is targeted at 6 to 12 months, and I know they've had success with getting them through quicker. And then you have the emergency congregate shelter, which is what historically we would think about as an emergency shelter, which is just a large room with a lot of beds, and the temporary stay for that is rather short. And it's also going to include supportive services. So as I mentioned, we take a look at what exactly is affordable housing. What does that look like? And it's going to depend on the area as well as how many people are living in the household. You take the total household for everybody in that household, and then you look at the income. So for an extremely low income, a family of 3 people or less, for extremely low, they'd have to make between 37 or less than 37,450. Very low is earnings of 62,400, and low income is $74,880. So part of the feasibility study that the Housing Trust also provided to us was going ahead and taking a look at the different financing tools for both options. And it's important to note that this is just an example only because funding sources are very dynamic. They're ever changing. What was available a couple years ago may not be available today. A couple years from now, there may be additional or different finance sources. So this is just to give you an example. In permanent affordable housing, you've got grants from HCD, you've got tax credits, there are different target populations funds such as veterans housing, county has funds as well, and then you have local participation, sometimes from cities, oftentimes that's a land donation. With transitional housing, there are also funds out there from the county and from the Regional Housing Trust, but a lot of times the responsibility is going to fall on the city. So moving on, the study that we presented in February through the Regional Housing Trust presented a scenario evaluation matrix, and it took a look at options for affordable housing for large families, which was the low-income product similar to what we have at Elwood, affordable for special needs. I know that's really hard to read, which is extremely low income. And then you also had the transitional housing. And what they said to us was that the most competitive type of product was going to be affordable for special needs. That's where the greatest financing was going to be available. So that meant there was going to be greatest developer interest for something like that as well, and it maximizes the site for housing affordability. This is just an example of what scenario 1, affordable housing for large families, would look like. Something like this would have a combination of 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units for families, and so something like this on that site for Dale, they kind of planted it there, would be about 3 stories for 79 units. And then scenario 2, which we heard early in public comment, was something that one of the commentators mentioned they liked, and that might be because these are smaller units. These are intended more for 1 to 2 family households, so you can get a smaller footprint on the property on 2 stories. So now we're going to move on to what the updated considerations are, what we're looking forward, or what the new information for tonight is. So the updated considerations, we're going to present 3 to you this evening. Option 1 is going to continue to be just a straight permanent affordable housing product. Option 2 would separate the site to provide transitional housing on a half-acre site, and then permanent housing on the remainder, or 1.67. And then option 3 is also going to take a look at dividing the property into 2 different developments, but it's going to give only a 1/4 acre to transitional and almost 2 acres for permanent. So option 1, as I mentioned, is going to be similar to what was presented in the feasibility study, and that is just straight permanent housing, permanent affordable housing. The site is zoned 20 units per acre. When you do 100% affordability, the state allows a density bonus, which would bump it up, an 80% density bonus, which would provide for 36 units per acre. That gets you up to 79 units. And it could be permanent affordable or permanent supportive. Council could go ahead and direct staff how they would like us to pursue that. We would go ahead and issue an RFP to find a partner, an affordable housing developer. It would be upon that developer to go ahead and find the capital stacking, what kind of tax credits or grants they would want to pursue or financing The city's contribution in this situation would be the land. We would provide the land for them to go ahead and build on. So our contribution would be the 6.5 million that we've already invested to acquire the site and clear it and demo it. And then we'd have staff time ongoing to monitor the site, similar to what we do with Alwood and Heritage Oaks, and make sure that the individuals living there are within the income limitations. So just considerations as we move into options 2 and 3. We're going to go through some information with regards to costs. Going to take a look at the capital costs that would be involved to go ahead and get the products on site. We're going to take a look at 2 different products, Pallet and Life Arcs. We went ahead and took a tour of those last month, or it might have been earlier this month. Each of those bedrooms that we're going to provide are going to have individual bathrooms. We did hear that that was a best practice to do. It alleviates some problems moving forward and operating the sites. There would be a laundry room, community room, offices for the administration and operations, as well as security, and then site preparation. The costs that we are going to provide are very rough estimates, but they'll give council a good idea. Then you've got operational costs. Again, they're supportive services with case management, security, health and mental services, and meals. So we'll take a look at operational costs. Then we'll also take a look at what funding sources are available as of right now. Again, I mentioned that is ever changing, so we're just looking at what we can provide to you today. And then another consideration is that we would look at these as 2 separate developments. So we would pursue the transitional housing, going ahead and getting that developed, and then also separately work to issue an RFP to a permanent affordable developer. So option 2 here is a hybrid product. Again, we're taking a look at dividing the site into 2 separate developments. One would be a ½ acre, and the remainder would be for permanent affordable housing. So with a ½ acre on transitional, depending on the product type we take a look at, we can go ahead and place between 28 and 50 beds. And then the remainder of the site at 1.67 acre, you can get up to 60 units for permanent affordable housing. These are the products that we are discussing tonight. One is the pallet product, and you can see that these require separation. And then the Life Arc, those are attached units. So you can get more Life Arc beds on a smaller amount of space than you would be able to the pallet product. This is just a very rough conceptual site plan that both Pallet and Life Arc provided to us. You can see Pallet on the left side there. Again, these are attached. They require separation, or detached requiring separation. So there's 28 beds on ½ acre. And then Life Arc, they're attached, require less space. So you can get 50 beds on a ½ acre site. Okay, so taking a look at the cost for something like this, and that is very small. Again, apologies. So we're going to look at both 28 and 50 beds. So the numbers are going to vary, but when we take a look at getting 28 beds to 50 beds, each with their own bathroom, the offices, communal space, the capital costs are going to be between 2.5 and 5.4 million. So 2.5 for the 28 beds, 5.4 for 50. That's going to also take into consideration site preparation, connecting to utilities and whatnot, and rough estimates. Then you have annual operation costs that are going to be based at approximately $110 per bed per night. So the annual operation is between 1.1 million for the 28 beds and 2 million a year for the 50 beds, for a total cost of between 3.6 and 7.4 million before we take a look at the funding opportunities that are available. Funding opportunities that are available include grants from the COG. They do have a, and I think I might have missed that earlier, but they do have a innovative, affordable, and homeless program where they will go ahead and grant up to $25,000 per bed. They only have $500,000 available at this time, so that's what we would go ahead and apply for. Then you have, or the city receives an allocation from the PLHA grant every year of about 110,000. So we would apply that towards the operation and capital costs. And then the county has the city's Council of Governments Interim Housing Service Fund, which will offset operational costs at $88 per bed per night. So take into consideration those different funding points, and the net impact to the city would be between 2 million and 5.2 million for the first year. Then your successive years, again, the operating grant is from the county. We're not sure if that will be continually available. So taking a look at the worst case scenario, we would only account for the PLHA grant being available. And so that would give an impact to the city of between roughly 1 million and 2 million for operating costs in successive years. So the next product or option is option 3, and that's looking at a smaller site. That's a 1/4 acre, so roughly 11,000 square feet for transitional and the remaining to permanent affordable housing. That is going, on this situation, we're only going to look at the Life Arc because you can get more on a smaller piece of land. So looking at the Life Arc product, you can get 25 units on a 1/4 acre. Remainder would be for permanent supportive or affordable housing. You can get up to 69 units. And then again, similarly looking at the different costs that would be involved for this, you would go ahead and it would be approximately 3 million for the capital costs, another 1 million for operational costs, for a total of the first year at about 3.9 million. Then we'd go ahead and apply those different funding opportunities that we went through, and the net cost to the city for a 1/4 acre, 25 units would be about 2.5 million. And operational costs in successive years about 900,000. So also just wanted to go through some additional considerations when we're looking at dividing the property for 2 different types of developments. Minimum 2 years of operation of a transitional housing would be recommended. Specifically for the Regional Housing Trust and the grant that they provide, it's a minimum of 1 year. However, they do prorate if it's less than 2 years. So 2 years operation would be recommended. A phased approach could be considered. So as I mentioned, we'd start with the transitional housing, then move towards getting an RFP together for an affordable housing for the permanent affordable housing portion. Local preference is permissible, so we could give priority to individuals experiencing homeless within the city, but we could not restrict it to only homeless within Glendora. And the county program does require that if we have occupancy fall below 95%, we'd have to make those beds available to others within the county. Also, keep in mind that the property was acquired using funds from the Housing Authority Fund, which require that we do put permanent affordable units on the market. So we would want to create those. Otherwise, we may need to go ahead and reimburse that fund. And also, now that the city owns the property, it is subject to the California Surplus Land Act, which requires that we do have some affordable housing. If it's 100% affordable housing, it would qualify as exempt. Okay, almost done. So we're going to go ahead and summarize. The first option is permanent affordable housing, where it would be all permanent affordable, and the council could decide whether or not we were going to go extremely low or permanent, or something similar to the Elwood, which would be just a low income product. Option 2 would go ahead and divide the property into 2, a 1/2 acre for transitional housing between 28 and 50 beds, and the remainder for permanent housing. And that would cost the city between 2 and 5.2 million per year, and 1 to 2 million in successive years. Option 3 further reduces the amount of land that we put towards transitional to to a half a acre, I'm sorry, to a quarter acre and 25 beds, and then permanent housing on just about 2 acres for a maximum of 69 units at a cost of about 2.5 million for the first year and 900,000 in successive years. And again, as I mentioned, permanent affordable housing could be for either supportive or just low income. And I think before I went ahead and did the recommendation, I just also wanted to remind council that any of these decisions or options, when you get to that point, nothing's going to solve the homeless program, but anything we do is going to be a help. Also wanted to go ahead and mention that by choosing permanent affordable housing completely, while it's not addressing and removing people directly that are homeless, it is a preventative measure, and it is going to prevent people who otherwise might be homeless. It's going to give them a place to live. And then also, if you do go with transitional, again, 2 years, because we're cycling individuals in and out, and if we assume 25 individuals are cycling out 2 or 3 times a year, that's going to get 100 to 200 people placed into permanent homes over the course of 2 years. So in summary, the options for council's consideration is option 1, permanent affordable housing for the entire site. Go ahead and divide it into 2 separate products, of half an acre for transitional, the remainder for permanent affordable housing, or option 3, to divide it again into 2 with a quarter acre for transitional and the remainder towards permanent housing. And I know it's a lot of information, so I might have rushed through it, and I'm here to answer any questions you might have.
Valerie, thank you for handling a very difficult and complex human problem. And no one has the answer nationwide or even worldwide, I don't think. And as you've expressed here, there are a lot of moving parts. There are mandates we need to comply with. There are funds that we need to obtain. There's funding sources that come and go. Partners come and go. There's a lot of finger pointing among cities and county and state and even national groups. And yet there's human lives that we have to care for each and every day. Within the city, we have somewhere between 65 and 100 people that are unhoused. And as has been shown, it's a topic, it's the top topic and issue that our citizens are talking about. So you've done a great job in a short amount of time in trying to peel back all the parts of the onion to allow us to come to this point and at least attempt to make a solution that will help these folks. So with that, I'm going to turn to Karen and Gary. As some of you may or may not know, part of the assignment, and we all have different assignments as part of the council work that we do, but they are involved with a lot of the housing assignments that come our way. So I think it would be appropriate for them to opine first. Maybe we'll go with Karen first. She's the more senior person here in terms of service, not of age. I want to clarify that. And I know in your almost 20 years of service, this topic is not new, but I think we're close to at least making an attempt to help fix it. So with that, Karen, why don't you start first, and then Gary, you can go. Okay.
Right, thank you. And as Valerie mentioned, there's no one fix that's going to solve the homelessness crisis. It would be nice if there was a silver bullet, but there's not. So anything that we do continues to help in that struggle. And I know that we continue to see in our community surveys that that is a concern for our residents, and that people want to see that addressed. And it would be helpful to those who are unhoused as well as to those who tell us that I don't want to see this, that if we could find a way to meet the needs going both directions. But unfortunately, whatever we do continues to try to help solve that in some way. I know tonight that the concerns from those who live in that neighborhood, traffic speed and parking. And I think whether this project happens or not, those are issues that need to be addressed. And I think that the parking we have addressed somewhat with the preferential parking, but it sounds like that may still be a little bit of an issue. So one to continue to work at. And traffic and speed, as the chief addressed, it sounds like that's going to be looked at as well and will continue to need to be looked at. But for this project, and not only with the field trip that the council went on, but I think some of us have had the opportunity firsthand to see these projects, to meet the individuals, to see how their lives have been changed. And so I think we need to have a product that provides that very low threshold, so that permanent supportive or the very low, because Elwood meets another need. And so to add another product to our tool belt that meets the needs of those other folks. And we need to have some transitional housing. If the council decides tonight that they're not going to make it part of this project, then we need to look at some other way to do that, whether it's to continue to rent out some of the motels, but that product needs to exist and we need to find a way to offer that. So if it's not with option 3, then we're going to need to look at the hotels and be serious about that, because that piece of the puzzle still needs to exist. Because it's been shared at the council meetings before that folks don't want to see our unhoused residents in the South Hills. Okay, well then where are we going to invite those folks to go? So that if they're not going to be here, then we have to say, where are they going to be? So that's why that needs to be a piece of that equation. And I think one of the clarifications too, that whatever we decide with this project, that transitional housing doesn't mean walk-up housing, that the people who are placed there are referred there, and it happens in a very controlled environment. And I think if you've had the opportunity to go to some of the other communities where that has happened, you'll see that, and Baldwin Park is a perfect example, where the neighborhood around that transitional housing has actually improved from what it was prior to the introduction of that transitional housing. So I think that that there's a little bit of difference. This is not a shelter, as in the way that people maybe experience the cold weather shelters, where people would line up and go to that these are intentional housing opportunities. So I know that Mr. Boyer has more to add to that, but as you stated, Mr. Mayor, that this is a conversation that's been going on a long time. And I think it's time that we go beyond the talking and move to some sort of action, and that every community needs to do its part. For many years we said Pasadena, Pomona, and that's not right. Every community needs to do its part. And many of our unhoused residents are Glendora residents. They don't want to be told, oh, go to Lancaster, go to this city, go to that city, because they grew up here. and whatever circumstances led them to be unhoused, they want to stay in Glendora. And so I think to find opportunities to let them stay here is important for us to consider. So, Mr. Boyer.
Appreciate that. You know, we find ourselves in a situation, this isn't the first time we've been here, and we have choices to make, and our choices are bad, badder, and baddest. Okay, there's no good options here. But something has to be done. You know, one of the things that I look at, that it's terrible that it's happening, but it's the fact that the neighborhood down around there, the corner of Barranca and Arrow Highway, is unique because it involves the jurisdictions of Los Angeles County, the city of Covina, the city of Azusa, and the city of Glendora. And so, as you that live down there know, there is a situation down there that's where people have a tendency to congregate, and we need to make sure and get them off the street, whether, no matter how you fall into this, your opinion of this, we all agree we need to get people off the street. So, Karen spoke on the issue of transitional housing. Is not like an emergency shelter where people are just picked up and they're dropped off somewhere. People do actually have to go through a process and qualify to be in the traditional or transitional housing. And they're typically in the transitional housing for anywhere from a couple of weeks to maybe up to 90 days until they find a more permanent solution. And that's a product that I think we need here in the city of Glendora. I don't think we need 50 beds. I think that's too much. I believe a 25 bed and 25 is about the smallest project that makes sense. But I definitely don't think we need 50 beds in town. I will share with you, and until you've been there and had the opportunity to see it, we've had the opportunity to visit a lot of these shelters, a lot of different projects, whether they be more permanent, temporary, on various levels. And it's actually a little bit shocking as to how clean they are, how well they're taken care of, as long as they have the right services in place. And that's the bigger thing that we have to make sure of, is we have to make sure that we're looking at having the correct services in place, and we have to make sure that we have the security in place. Parking has come up multiple times. And, you know, what we're looking at with the Life Arc product, which is what I sit on the San Gabriel Valley Regional Housing Trust. And what we basically do there is we fund these projects. And one of the things that's been extremely frustrating to me is we're funding these projects that are costing upwards of $800,000 to build a studio apartment. And that's our taxpayer money that's being used for that. When the government gets involved, the costs just go through the roof. So the Life Arc product brings that cost down, even though it's still extremely high, to about $100,000 a unit. It's also more of a temporary type of housing. It's got a lifespan of 20 years, but it's built in such a way, almost like a mobile home, where it's put in place on a permanent basis, but they can easily be removed. So if it turns out we don't need as many as what we have, they can be removed, or if we want to do something more permanent at some time in the future, we do have the ability to make those adjustments, which is why I support that type of product. But I truly believe, and I wouldn't be supporting this if I didn't believe it, I truly believe that some of the things that we're worried about are going to get better with a project like this in town. Will give us the opportunity to place some of the people that need something on a temporary basis, the people that need things on a more permanent basis. We do have some housing already in town. We've got a few different facilities, and this will just be added to that to that inventory. But the bottom line is, we know we have to do something. Doing nothing is no longer an option. So look forward to hearing what everybody else has to say, and something.
All right, thank you, Gary. David, I'll go with you next. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to start off with, I'm really stuck. First of all, I support this concept and the idea that we need to do something. And I've supported our vision since we learned about the Dale Road property, and I've seen it scraped. Boy, it makes the neighborhood look a whole lot better now than what it did. So what was there before couldn't have been attractive at all. I think that while we have some great successes in town with the affordable housing projects, Elwood and Glendora Gardens and a couple of those others, remarkable success. We had more space and revenue to continue to build those, to create more affordable income doors would be fabulous. But I think now what we need is this emergency shelter opportunity. I didn't say that shelter, but emergency solution opportunity to help the unhoused and give us a way to get them some help and improve their life, get wraparound services, get brought back into society. I think that we need to look at the hybrid approach with an interim temporary shelter option. I like the 25-bed option, as we can turn those. That gives a short-term solution to get people connected, find out what they need, and get them into a better long-term solution. So not looking at a long stay there, but to get them out of a tent or get them off the ground and into some wraparound services. Looking at the options during the tour, you mentioned the pallet product that might have individual bathroom facilities. I didn't see those, but I'm not sure. I trust you say they do. They do. I think the LifeArc product is much more durable, and if there's anything we've heard in our travels, it's if you're going to do something in a not permanent, stuck in the ground type product that could be portable or adjustable, pick something that's durable, that will last some time while we're making this learn and while we're making some decisions on, do we want to make a permanent structure to offer that service? I don't think that the one option offers that durability. I think the LifeArc that we saw is the better choice. Certainly hope we could lean that direction. Webster's defines permanent as a lasting, fixed, not temporary. Why I struggle with the term permanent when I say I don't mind a permanent building, but a permanent stay is what I have some real concern about. I would hope that we could offer a resource that doesn't fill up once and then we're handcuffed again and have nothing else to offer as the need grows or the need continues. Creating this to offer some solutions more than once. And so turns and the number you share of 100 turns possibly in a 1 year or 200 in the temporary shelter is a great solution. Larger, more permanent building, I would hope we would still use that as a transition to offer people a longer continuum of care to get into a better place, to go on somewhere so we don't have that door permanently filled with the same party for its life existence. Because then we've created another affordable housing and not a service solution. The hybrid is something I would really favor. Funding, sorry, but I'm very disappointed in our local county support. Money we've sent and generated from sales tax that has not come back to us is embarrassing, it's insulting, and county needs to hear that. I'm sorry. Wrong. And I'm of the opinion that we ought to be getting 80% of the revenues that we generate. 80%. Gee, that'd be $16 million. We'd have something to deal with right now over the time of the sales tax measure, as opposed to the insulting 400,000 that we had to beg and grovel to get. Wrong. So funding sources are not easy, but no more than that nice guy. We need to go demand our piece of pie that we're generating, period. And services need to hear that. Because we're offering a solution, we're doing something as a community. County needs to recognize that and step up and hand us our money. Fund this solution. Go to the next person and save some comments for more.
All right, well, we're on round one. We may have round 2 or 3, I don't know. Michael, please.
Thank you, Mendel. My colleagues brought up a lot of great points. We have been struggling with this for quite some time, and we have some decisions to make. This is not the only one and only decision to make tonight. This will be many decisions along the path on doing this. I have struggled greatly personally with this, with my personal belief system, and also what we're dealt with. So I kind of wanted to set the stage. I mean, you saw on page 24 today of the presentation about what the community wants us to address the homeless issue, but they didn't give us how. And that's a challenge. That's on us that we have to deal with this and try to come up with some solutions. So it's important to know how we got here and what we're going to be dealing with in the future so that we can figure out a path forward the best we can. This is some statistics because I did a lot of research from last week through the weekend, through yesterday, and a good part of today with staff. David and I have worked closely together because of the Brown Act. There's only 2 of us that can work on anything together. And so we have been working and trading notes and trying to come up with solution moving forward. Just as a point of reference, it's estimated that greater than 30% of the homeless suffer from chronic mental illness, and an equal amount suffer from substance abuse. In 1967, the Latterman Act, which is the Bill of Rights for those with mental issues, passed by 77 to 1, and almost the same in the Senate back in, like I said, 1967. It was a full effect of 1972. No major funding was allowed with that. They didn't add any funding. They just put these Bill of Rights in there. And just for the record, a lot of folks say that Ronald Reagan shut down mental institutions. He did not. It's a wives' tale. Just since the 1980, there's been 5 mental institutions in California that were closed. In 1980, almost 100 years in operation, the Downey Asylum was closed. In 2009, after 60 years, the Agnews Development Center was closed. 2010, after 10 years, Sierra Vista was closed. And in 2014, after 87 years, the Latterman Development Center over here in Pomona was closed and it has 2,000 beds there. It's still there, and it's given over to the college over there to put some sort of facility there, a live, work, study type situation. I reached out to the county and to see, hey, is there a possibility of opening this thing up? And that was a non-starter conversation. But they're putting the pressure onto us to do something when they have a facility ready to go there. So it's quite frustrating. In 2018, after 127 years in operation, Sonoma Development Center was closed. So they're taking things off the table. Now, the Latterman, the gentleman who he was in the assembly that sponsored this, he later came out and said that I wanted the law to help the mentally ill. He stated, I never meant for this to prevent those who needed care from receiving it. Again, this is put onto us. Looking solely at in California last year in 2023, the state allocated and spent $3.3 billion targeted at addressing homelessness. $3.6 billion spent on mental health last year, with an estimated of 181,399 homeless in the state of California, which equates to spending $18,191 per homeless person and $19,845 spent per medical client. That's your tax dollars at work. Add to the stress, Governor Newsom approved the closure of 4 prisons. DeVal Vocational Institute, California Correctional Center, California City Correctional Facility, and Chacawalla, if I pronounced that correctly, Valley State Prison. AB 109 was supposed to help with realignment funds to help these folks get situated. California releases roughly 786,970 men and 200,866 women from prison and jails every year. Over 5,000 inmates were released during COVID as early release. Glendora's historical homeless count ranges from 18.7, I don't know how you get it, 0.7, in 2017 to 145 individuals in 2020, depending on whose count you're looking at. There's multiple counts out there. Coming full circle, the council has budget and oversight for what we do here, fiscal stability, and listening to our constituents and what we need to do. And I'm considering this homeless situation as an unfunded mandate from the state of California, not providing funds. With full disclosure, and I have to say this, I've worked with some of the developers out there asking questions, Mercy House and National Core. I also reached out to the developers over there for the small from ArcLife, and to get a better understanding for the business model for permanent supportive housing and how that works. And as was said earlier, there is no funding for transitional housing to speak of. It's year to year, put your hand out and see if you can get some funding. However, there's a pathway for permanent supportive housing with grants, vouchers, and there's a whole system set up for that, I believe, nationwide. I'd like to think what we're contemplating on here would be building a launching pad, not a landing pad. More in favor of doing the combination, as I said earlier, of 25 of the smaller units and the transition, not the transitional, but permanent supportive housing wraparound services complement each other, and it's a smaller project. I have a 2-part motion here that I would like to see if I can possibly get a second for.
Michael, could you, are you done with your comments? And I promise to come right back to you.
Sure.
I just want to say a couple of things. So, a philosopher by the name of Yogi Berra had a great statement when he said, when you come to the fork in the road, take it. We're at that fork in the road. And as all of us have experienced and shared and talked, and we were on a tour, as has been said, and sleepless nights, and one of those forks is you ignore, which we've done for many years. We can't ignore now. We have to do something. The county, the state, federal government has not been a worthy steward of the billions of dollars that they've been given to assist in helping the unhoused. And so it now comes to us. As has been said, there are other homes that are in our town that do assist, and they're doing well, performing well. We have to do something, and this is a no-win, as Gary said. Whatever we do, there's going to be people that are not going to like it. But I feel strongly that if we can at least begin to provide staff with a direction that they so desperately want from us, that they can then begin to get the RFPs and all of the data that will help us to really begin to know which road we're going to go down, we've been talking and exploring and thinking. And probably some of us have been wishing it would just go away. The magic dust from Disneyland would just solve it all, but it's not. And so I do support a hybrid approach. I have no idea what Michael's going to say in his motion, but I do support that. And I do think that we're in a position as a city, both from police and public service and Debbie Lopez and her team, that we are in the best possible place to take that fork in the road to lend a hand to try to help these people with some of the severe problems which they have. And so with that, that's all I would have to say. So Michael, you alluded to.
Sorry about that.
Pardon?
Looks like the council member wanted to make a comment, and then I just had a couple comments.
Oh, I just have a couple questions and again, tonight we're just talking about concepts. We're not getting into the details, but a couple of things that I think it would help to be addressed. A
Yeah.
lot of the comments were made tonight talked about parking. And so we've got over 2 acres of property there. So my question would be, is there a possibility of us creating some sort of a public parking opportunity at this site that could help alleviate some of the parking in the neighborhood to get the people that work there on Arrow Highway off of their streets?
Great question. So, I'm sure all of you are aware of the parking lot as you're heading into the proposed site where the cars are all parking. It's a mishmash of cars. And in fact, you hit several items on the list that I was going to talk about. Just wanted to provide some commentary and remind everyone the things that we've talked about. So I'll start with parking if that's okay with you. So, the residents of the community around Dale, when we started to interact them, one of the first things that came up was parking at the surrounding impacts of the businesses that were there, including the facility that used to be there that we're talking about. And so staff worked with them to develop a preferential parking zone, which has then caused some of the other cars that were parked in that area to further park in the parking lot. So one of the items we would definitely look at is having to work with those businesses to develop probably a different parking layout and looking at some of the ingress and egress. So yes, that would absolutely be something we would do to work with the developer and or just the city in general and those businesses to try to better organize how that's parked internally there. But also add that some of the tours that we went on as the council went on, the parking needs for a facility like we've spoken about this evening is not very significant. There aren't as many cars as people think. I think one of the ones specifically we went to was a veterans facility in El Monte, which had like 10 cars and 70 people there. So I think we can look at those things and bring back additional information as necessary throughout this process. If it's okay, I wanted to raise two other issues. Talk about two other issues?
If I could ask one other
Yeah.
question coming to that, because as we talk about the traffic issue, is there a way, because the entrance off of Grand Avenue is an easement, it's not property that we own.
Yeah.
Is there a way as we move forward with this project to take a look at the main entrance being off of Grand Avenue and using the entrance off of Dale that goes into the parking lot as a secondary or even an emergency?
Yeah, we have talked about some of the entrances and requirements, mostly as relates to emergency service vehicles that would have to access the site. Valerie, do you happen to remember offhand, or Moises? I promised I would call him up one more time to have him walk up and back this evening. Do you recall some of the conversations that we have? I know that these are all things that we would look at as site development as the access. I know Grand's just a singular direction, which may create some challenges, but it is something that we would look at.
Right, we didn't have a consensus, but we did say we'd look into the area off Grand, but
Is Moises running away right now? I think he's walking away.
coming out.
Smart man.
He's coming up to talk about it. Here we go.
The other component, and Adam, you kind of touched on it, one of some of the research that we've done on the site, for the site, and the adjacent convalescent home, we actually found a plan for a parking lot along the wash that was drawn, if memory serves me, back in the mid-1960s.
That's correct.
So there was a plan in place at one point in time to actually accommodate all the vehicles needed for the both convalescent homes at one point in time, but it was never built. Largely because there's a lot of big trees in the way in those drive aisles. So part of the conversation that we can engage in is working more closely with that convalescent home to better organize the entryway and exitway, because it is tight. Coming in off of Grand is a little tight for vehicles, as is the driveway there off of Dale.
And one other thing that came up tonight that I had not heard before, if the transitional housing is less than 95% occupied, we need to open it up to outside residents?
That's what is in the COGIS grant, yes. And we do have, I didn't mention this, but we do have Brielle available if there were questions, and we also have Elmas from the county available online to answer that question.
My question about that is, do we have any control over that? I mean, just to be blunt, if we had open space and we had people from Azusa or Covina that needed to be there, that's manageable. If we have people coming in from Los Angeles or Long Beach, it sounds terrible, but we all have our own issues to deal with, and we can control our local problems. But taking on problems of very large cities, I don't think is something we want to address. So.
And I think that came up in our conversations before, that usually through that coordinated entry system and through referrals, that it's usually within that close radius, that they're not trying to pull people from way over, that it's just in that immediate spa area, service providing area. So the experts are on the Zoom right there waiting to jump in and answer, but that's the way that I understand it, that it would be from the spa, but go ahead.
Is that correct, Brielle?
Barone?
That is correct. And it has yet to happen yet. So I guess fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you're looking at it, all of our sites that are currently operating are still, just working off of the wait lists for the clients that do meet their local preference. But all of our sites maintain 2 wait lists. So clients that meet the nexus to the city where the shelter is located, and then also a secondary list for the clients that don't meet the nexus. So if we were to solve homelessness in Baldwin Park, then Baldwin Park would start taking clients from South El Monte and other neighboring cities. So it's like was mentioned before, it is in the same spa and kind of concentrically going out within a radius of where the site's located.
Appreciate it. That was my question.
And I'll just add to that if you guys can hear me. So good evening there, Mayor Pro Tem, council members. One Williams here with the county's homeless initiative office. Correct. So, I mean, if you're talking roughly, let's say 30 units, 95%, you're talking close to about 1.5. Again, what's a half, but maybe 2. And so most cities actually all the cities that we found to be working with haven't fallen below that 95% at this particular point, because again, they do have current waiting lists for people to get in. But if it does happen, it would go through the coordinated entry system, would be kind of that sub-regional area within the cities around you. So great question. Thank you.
Tony, what's the time frame? So if we have our own list of preferred folks, how much time do we have to get that filled up before the county's list kicks in?
Question there, Councilmember Ellis. That's a great question. I believe it's within 30 days. So again, I think it should be within 30 days, but let me confirm that with you, the exact number.
Yeah, I'll just jump in quickly. As someone who's done the reporting, we're reporting out to the county team quarterly. So you do have a little bit of flexibility to make sure you're hitting 95%, across the term. For a lot of those smaller sites, that is only 1 or 2 units, right? When you're doing the math, but it's something that the Housing Trust can help on the technical assistance side and making sure that the service provider RFP takes that into account, where you can only have, 48 hours for bed turnover and just making sure that the wait list is always sufficiently stacked enough so that you can easily, get someone in and get them helped immediately and not fall below 95%. But there is sort of, understanding that you're going to need at least 24 hours to clean a unit and to contact the next person and make sure that they can get in.
So does the wait list count, or does they have to actually occupy? So if we have a wait list of 25 or 50 folks, and it's going to take us some time to make sure we vet them correctly to get them in there, that's going to take some time.
Yeah, so it's something the service providers are doing on an ongoing basis. When you know you have a unit upcoming, which often the providers do, right? Since they have someone connected to a housing resource, they'll start reaching out to the next person on the wait list. And then on the front end, we've also built in some time as well to make sure that, when you're going to start drawing down any sources that have a funding requirement, a minimum or a maximum threshold, you're going to give yourself a ramp up period, right? So in Azusa, most recently, Licata had 30 days to make sure that they got up to 100% occupancy, understanding that that's kind of the biggest lift. And it honestly hasn't been an issue ongoing because there's sufficient wait lists and clients are really motivated to get inside. So it hasn't taken very long once you contact the first couple people on the list to fill a unit.
And to clarify, a question was asked earlier, is there cross spa coordinated entry for, let's say if we have ours, so is it only spa 3 that we're in, or can they pull from another spa?
Is it that it would be within the spa? There's enough, unfortunately, there's many people experiencing homelessness in spa 3 with little interim housing. So the coordinated entry system wouldn't reach across spas.
Thank you.
Okay, Adam, are you done? Because,
I believe the Mayor Pro Tem has a question.
okay, I promised to get back to Michael.
Thank you.
David?
One curiosity I have about the capacity or fill rate, one of the things I think we're hoping to do is have a resource that if our human services group identifies someone that needs help and needs a temporary shelter tonight or tomorrow and accepts that, wow, I'd hate to have a facility in town that we created that we now have to go find another place to put them because we can't put them in our own help place.
So
We're running it full all the time. Our human services group loses a potential resource in their own backyard.
Mayor Pro Tem, just really quick on that front. I think from a staff perspective, and I'll just talk about it from a staff perspective, and I think it's a great question and something to consider is that we know even with 25 additional beds at interim basis, we could fill those tomorrow. Debbie and her staff would know that many individuals in this city that would take that help tomorrow if they had that opportunity, which is why the city and the city councils wisely invested with LA CADA for 8 additional beds in other areas. And it is why we would still continue, despite adding beds, to still work with hotels and motels for interim stays while we try to find resources for those individuals. The need that is out there is so significant that it would be a very long time before, and honestly, if the city council, Mayor Pro Tem, was in the position where we couldn't fill them, that's actually a good problem for us to have. And with Azusa doing their project next door and other surrounding cities having similar conversations, we are hopefully a little more insulated to some of the fallout than other agencies would be, but it is a valid concern. And I appreciate the candor because that is the frustration that cities have felt for a long time is we're putting all this money into it. We want to have first right at the service. And I think through Oni's comments and previous comments that you've heard is that the parties are trying to help us with that. It's just not 100%. So, but it is absolutely the correct frustration.
Thank you.
Okay, Michael,
Mayor, if you don't mind, just one time, and I apologize. There are some people here this evening that have talked about public safety and the feeling of safety, and I just wanted to reiterate is when we had the first community meeting that was out there, we talked about crime statistics, we talked about affordable housing, we talked about housing values, and I know I don't want to speak for the council, but from a staff perspective, and you have our assurances that depending on the direction that council gets and we have the RFP responses, that we will look at options which are fully contained the sites we visited had procedures to make sure individuals coming and going were safe, to make sure it's not just a congregate facility for people to come hang out outside. I think it's important to note that it's both safer for the individual and the community if someone is not laying on the streets and is not doing that. And so understanding there is some uncomfortableness with that, you have our commitment to make sure that we walk through all of those areas. And I believe it is going to be much safer if we can get individuals out of the street than continue to have the issues that we have on them. And I just wanted to
No,
be clear,
that's a
we-
great point.
We
That-
touched on that.
That's an excellent point, and we were witnesses to the process that happens there. So thank you for saying that. Okay, Michael, let me keep with my word, and I'll get back with you because I think you said you had a motion.
Yes, I do, Mayor. David Friedendahl and myself had worked on this together, obviously because of the Brown Act, and we came to a pretty good resolution here, or motion. And we worked with staff as well on this, so hopefully it covers all the bases. It's a two-part motion. My understanding, we have to take this in two parts. We can't combine them.
So we know what the motion is. I have no idea if I could tell you if that's
I don't
true or
know what
not,
the
but
motion is, so I don't know.
sounds
Yeah.
like you're gonna read something very long here, so.
A big print. Okay. Motion one, I move that staff be directed to prepare a request for proposal and issue the same, inviting interested persons to submit bids to the city for 25 basic living quarters with their own restrooms, community laundry facility, and a small office in support of transitional interim accommodations designed with a targeted length of stay, 90 days or less. Staff will report back to council biannually on how well the target is being met. The transitional interim facility will utilize 1/4 to 1/2 acre of the Dale property, fully secured, fenced, landscaped with wraparound services with minimal impact to the existing residential community and managed by a third party. Following receipt of the same from the interested bidders, I further move that the staff be directed to evaluate the same and report their recommendations to the city council for consideration and authorization to negotiate the appropriate development agreement.
Are you moving option 3?
Sort of.
Just one point, I'm trying to catch that all here. So one point of clarification, Valerie, I'm sure you had that memorized, so we'll ask you to read that back for the record.
Actually, Kathleen has a copy.
Oh,
right
there you
next to
go. Thank you for doing that. That would be the issuance of RFP plural, correct? In that instance,
Well, let me give you the other
potentially one for the provider and the 25 beds, potentially one for the actual development of those units, and then
Correct.
one potentially for the operation of those?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
Motion 2.
Well,
I do have one.
shouldn't we just keep with one motion?
If
at
there's a
time?
second on the motion, then we can have discussion.
Okay, is
I
there-
will second that
is there a
motion.
second?
Okay,
Motion and second.
discussion.
Gary.
Discussion. Question for the transitional housing, you mentioned in your motion, third-party management.
Correct. Like Lakata or somebody of that nature. Let staff go out and put a proposal out.
Okay, with local oversight, but,
Correct. With Debbie's group.
okay, that's understood? Okay.
Yeah, that would make sense to us. It would be a dual approach to help run a facility like that. Maybe even some office space for her and her staff at that location.
Right. There's a,
I think I caught that in there with joint facilities, so.
Right, right.
All right, there's a motion by Michael, the second by David, that's on the table for what I think we're understanding to be kind of a transitional.
And I just want to make clear, you said between 1/4 and 1/2 an acre of the site?
Correct.
He did
Okay.
say that. For 25 beds, and for council that kind of comports to option 3, so. First half, okay? Yeah, so I need to know, so can we hear the second half before we vote on motion 1? Or what does Robert's Rules of Order, or what does our city attorney say?
You can ask to hear the second motion before you vote on the first.
Is that the desire to hear the second motion? Okay, okay,
Yeah.
Surprise.
so take the second rabbit out of the bag and.
Okay.
and,
If I may, not to complicate things,
you know,
I just
option
got
two.
I just got a text from Brielle who did say that while restrooms are great, it also doesn't motivate them as much to move out. That was just an idea she said. So she said, if you'd like, it'd be better to give staff the flexibility to come back with both options, with restrooms and
I
without.
believe they have that option. It's pretty wide open to bring back a solution because if the Life Arc, you can do that, but the pallet you cannot. And we didn't specify which product.
So potential for individual or joint facilities then?
Yeah, because we didn't specify a product. One product, you can't
Just
have
so we're
that.
clear, the motion then would be for potentially individual or joint facilities such as washrooms, restrooms, et cetera, et cetera?
Yes,
Okay,
that's the
okay.
thought.
I just want to make sure that I understand.
It was vague enough because that's what you wanted, right? With specificity.
Okay,
Looking to the expert, Valerie, does that work for you?
That, I think so.
Thank you.
We can always give you more, right?
Are you done?
so read option, or,
Okay, motion two.
motion two.
I move that staff be directed to prepare a request for proposal and issue the same inviting interested persons to submit bids to the city for between 40 and 60 permanent supportive housing with wraparound services and security for the predominantly studio residential building that has a certain portion to accommodate small families with local preference and minimal impact to the existing residential community, as well as other rules the city may set with a minimum of a 55-year covenant on the available acreage. The financial contribution from the city may be the land. Following receipt of the same from the interested bidders, I further move that the staff be directed to evaluate the same and report their recommendations to the city council for consideration and authorization to negotiate an appropriate development agreement.
All right, so Danny,
So
I,
I would say, let's make sure this doesn't get overly complicated. So
Like-
there's a motion and a second. Let's vote on the first motion,
for motion one,
on the motion.
and now we've
And then
heard,
yeah.
we've heard motion two, but,
Yeah.
okay. So does anybody need to hear motion one again? Okay. We ready to vote? Any further discussion? Okay, Madam Clerk, please call the roll for
For motion one, okay, Councilmember Alves.
Yes.
Councilmember Boyer,
Yes.
Councilmember Davis, Mayor Pro Tem Frindall,
Yes.
Mayor Thompson.
Yes. I
Motion
just, there's been
carries.
such suspense around all these motions. I had to make some suspense there. So
Well, motion carries 5-0.
5-0. Okay, so Danny,
Now there's a motion and we're waiting for a second.
I will second motion two.
okay, so there's a motion two that's been read, made by Michael, seconded by David. Discussion,
Question.
including you, Mr.
Okay,
Freeman.
on, on the second motion, the number of housing is going to depend on whether we use a quarter acre or a half an acre. The current affordable product allows for more than 60 units if we only used a quarter acre.
That is correct. So if we used a quarter acre, we could have a maximum, I believe it was 60. And if we used, if we used a quarter acre, we could get up to 69. If we used a half acre, we could get up to 60. And from the feasibility study in our conversations, we had heard that probably the minimum to make it pencil out was 50. And the closer you get to 60, the better the competitiveness is for funding.
And on that note, Councilman, I wanted to ask the maker of the motion, the motion you said was predominantly what type of unit?
Studio.
Studio, so there could be an option, there could be 2+ bedroom units, a couple of them if there were a family or something else like that, that's a possibility?
Yes, that's.
Which
that's
would
what
also then affect the number of units, so I think we could stay within those gaps on either option.
And just to add to Gary to that, in talking with the two developers, they said their sweet spots between 40 and 60. When it goes higher than that, it's more difficult to manage.
Okay. Any other questions, Karen, David? Staff? Valerie,
Understood.
do you have any questions?
No, thank you.
Or Moises? Okay. Uh, ready to vote? On motion 2, do you want to hear it again? No? Okay.
Option 3, so yeah, go ahead.
Madam Clerk?
Yes, Councilmember Alves.
Yes.
Councilmember Boyer.
Yes.
Councilmember Davis. Mayor Pro Tem Freendall.
Yes.
Mayor Thompson.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
All right. This is a pretty historic time that now staff has, I think, very direct instructions on what to go looking for. We wish you the best of luck, and we want you to hurry back and tell us what you found. But
Right.
we know it's going to take some time. So
I would just add on that note, in terms of timeline, at least a couple months for RFP development, probably 2 to 3-ish months for RFP response and evaluation, another month to bring back. So 4 or 5 months out, Valerie, 4 to 6 months out.
That sounds reasonable.
Okay.
Yes.
Valerie, thank you once again, and I also want to express my thanks to Michael and Mayor Pro Tem David for the work that the two of you have done to get us to this point. I know that we've all been struggling with this for many years, and now this is the fork in the road that we have chosen. So that is a good thing, and so onward. All right. Okay. We are down to item 14. Valerie is still here, and that is a good thing. And the item is the adoption of an updated and economic action plan. So thank you for the good work that you have put in, and we're anxious to see it.
All right, thank you. So we are now switching gears from housing to economic development. Okay, so the economic development, as we know, has been a priority of the city. It has been included on the citywide strategic plans over the past several years. That's no exception with the current 2023-2025 citywide strategic plan. There are 7 goals. One of those goals is to implement strategic economic development. The goal of implementing strategic economic development, I know it says 7, there's actually 9 objectives with 37 tasks. The first objective is to update the economic action plan. And within that, there is the task of hosting a public workshop on modern economic development practices. That was completed back in September, almost a year ago. And with that, we kicked off the start of updating the economic action plan, and we will go through that now. So the economic action plan was first introduced in 2012 upon the dissolution of redevelopment agencies across the state of California. It was updated a couple times, but has not been updated since 2017. So today we have the updated 24-25 economic action plan. It is included in your packet, and it is broken out into 6 different sections, which we will review next. So the first section is Glendora today, and in this section, we're going to go ahead and summarize the data on the demographics of the city. I'm going to go ahead and talk about community partnerships that we have, including the San Gabriel Valley Economic Partnership, as well as the Glendora Chamber of Commerce, who has been a tremendous partner with the city, really working and supporting our business community from ribbon cuttings to promoting shopping local and just being a real tremendous resource to all of the businesses within the city. It's also going to talk about the business community, the fact that we have about 1,000 businesses in the city that have actual storefronts, as well as 500 home-based businesses. And it recognizes that the business community is really a crucial component of economic development as it provides local jobs, goods, and services to the community. Then we're also going to, it'll also talk about land use, and it talks about the fact that the city is predominantly built out. There's a very small percentage that is available for development. I think it's about 0.3% according to the last land use section of our general plan. But it also identifies that we have opportunity with older shopping centers that can be redeveloped, as well as the area around the A-Line station, and also the opportunity with the school sites for various reasons, including decreased enrollment. There are several school sites that have been identified as surplus and will be available, if not already, for development. The next section is going to discuss economic development, explains the importance of fostering economic development and a vibrant community to ensure the city's financial health and quality of life. And the clicker's tired too. Okay. Oh no, what did I do? Where am I? Okay, there we go. Sorry about that. So it's going to, again, talk about the purpose of economic development, explain that it really is multifaceted, requiring incorporating business growth, development, which is both residential and commercial, to generate wealth, which the city then can utilize to go ahead and provide a vast array of benefits to the community. Talks about how having a successful plan for economic development includes key factors, including safety, a high quality of life, and reliable infrastructure. We go ahead and talk about successes that have been experienced. In 2014, we were the most business-friendly city. We have a survey that we will be bringing to council in September that talks about the business community satisfaction with the city, which we are finding is very high. We talk a little bit about improvements of public areas and private investment that is seen through the development in the city. And we also take a look at the Glendora economy, take a look at the business composition. We see that we have a diversity of businesses, but healthcare is among the largest presence. We take a look at vacancy rates in the city, and we can be comfortable and assured knowing that we have a relatively low vacancy of 4.4% as compared to LA County's rate of 8.2%. Takes a look at the workforce and unemployment. And we'll look at gap analysis a little more in the next slide and talk a little bit more about strengths and challenges. So quick, this is just a slide that shows the first food hall that was opened in the San Gabriel Valley in 2020. The public areas that the city has went ahead and invested in, and a list of the developments that have either been completed or in progress. And then we take a look at gap opportunities, which is just going to show where the community has a demand for items and where they're going. When we see that they're leaving the city, then we see that those might be gap opportunities that we'll want to pursue for Glendora. So we looked at it in two ways. We looked at gap opportunities specific to Glendora, and then also looking at the retail trade area, which is the area that consumers are willing to drive to go ahead and get their consumer goods. So for Glendora, we found that the gap opportunities are service stations, fine dining and restaurants, family apparel, retail trade area includes sporting goods, specialty food stores, and beer, wine, and liquor. So the next section is going to be goals. And I should mention just our strengths and challenges, which I didn't have a slide for, but our strengths are going to include our strategic area. We are located very conveniently at the 57 and 210. We got great access to Los Angeles, Riverside, Orange, San Bernardino counties. Basically can get anywhere within an hour, hour and a half with our traffic these days. We've got a great quality of life. We've got good infrastructure. City's continually investing in that, great safety. And then our challenges are going to include, we do have an aging community. We've got a lack of readily available land. There's the high cost of development that's not specific to Glendora. And so now we'll move on to goals. So with our goals, sorry about that. Of course, with economic development, we're always going to take a look at retaining the businesses we have. That's the best way to tackle that, is we want to make sure that we are not losing any businesses and that we keep them here, but we're also going to work on attracting new businesses. And then we are going to take a look at our strategic areas. And the next slide will go over that. We've identified 6 strategic areas that we'll focus on. And then we've got the tasks and objectives that are identified within the citywide strategic plan. So these are the strategic areas that we'll go ahead and take a look at. We've got our Glendora Village, which of course is the heart of the community. We want to make sure that that is robust and doing well. We've got the Glendora Station area, which is basically a half-a-mile radius around the incoming A-line station. We have seen in other areas that the station is a catalyst for development, so we would expect to see investment and development around the area. Of course, we've got 940 South Grand, which is the Mayflower Center that is right off the 210 and Grand. Got 1000 East Route 66, the Tuesday morning shopping center. Got the Arrow Highway Corridor, which with the specific plan that was adopted in 2018, we have seen development and we have seen a spur in that with the Glendora Public Market, the 16 residential condos next door. And right now we've got, I think, about 100 residential units within the pipeline for development. So doing great along Arrow Highway. We want to continue that. And then there is 1332 South Lone Hill Avenue, which is across from the Diamond Ridge area. That was where the Ormco site is. It's about 3 acres. It was recently demoed, and so we've got a clear site there that's currently zoned manufacturing, but the city would be open to rezoning that to complement the surrounding areas. So those are our strategic areas within the plan. And then we have the, and that's way too small to see, but these are the 9 objectives and the 37 tasks that have been identified in the city's strategic plan. This covers 23 through 2025. We're halfway through that plan cycle, and I'm pleased to say that that is more than 50% completed. We've completed 21 of the tasks. With tonight, we'll go ahead and complete another 2, which will put our completion rate at about 62%. And we will continue to work on these tasks throughout the year and continuing into next year as well. So how do we get these things completed? We'll move on next to the strategy. And these are the different tools that we will use to go ahead and strategically complete those goals. We're going to work on business outreach and support. That includes business visits, business workshops. I mentioned we completed that business survey. And so we will take what we heard from the community and go ahead and address some of their concerns. And we will partner also with the chamber. I can't say enough that they are a great partner, and we'll work with leveraging our partnership to continue to address business outreach and support. Again, infrastructure improvement. We've got Public Works that has been working on streets and water improvements and infrastructure, and they have, I believe, committed to $350 million over the next 30 years of capital improvements in addressing that. We have public-private partnerships trying to help facilitate negotiations and agreements between public and private parties. Marketing and promotion, marketing the city through community profiles, through workshops with brokers, and also attending conferences such as the ICSC, which is the International Council of Shopping Centers. Updating our website with site inventory so businesses who want to come in can identify a location that might work for them. Placemaking, which is improvements like we've done in the village with Mita and the parklets, as well as, taking community art, which is something that the council recently just adopted. And then we'll take a look at incentives as well, which might be a tool to go ahead and attract businesses. So with incentives, we have both non-monetary and monetary incentives. With non-monetary, we can do things like streamline the permitting process, continually looking at it to go ahead and see how we might ease that process. Regulatory support, fast track entitlement, which is getting things through the process quicker. Access to resources, providing information to businesses, providing networking opportunities and business promotions, such as keeping a business directory on our website and promoting Shop Local. And then you have monetary incentives, which might include beautification grant or business loans for businesses that have expensive equipment costs or infrastructure, such as restaurants that have to get their grease traps in. Could provide a job creation tax credit or conceptual review fee waivers, or a sales tax agreement, which would be performance-based and which would be directly tied to the monetary benefit would be directly tied to tangible economic incentives and outcomes. So we actually also acknowledge that all businesses are important, but we also need to realize that resources are limited. And so we need to identify who our targeted industries and strategic areas would be to offer these monetary incentives. And so with that, we went ahead and included what a targeted identified industry cluster would be in the strategic areas. This is one of the tasks. It's task 2 under objective 1 of the citywide strategic plan. So this is the second task that would be completed with this item. And basically, we identified targeted industries as those that were identified in the gap analysis. So service stations, fine dining, family apparel, sporting goods, specialty food stores, beer, wine, and liquor. Strategic areas, Glendora Village, the station area, Grand Avenue, Route 66, Arrow Highway, and Lone Hill, 1332 South Lone Hill. So implementation, how do we go ahead and get this done? Well, I think it's important to note that it is a team. Economic Development Division does spearhead economic development, but really it is done by everybody citywide, from city council, and every department plays a part in economic development. City council certainly is a champion for economic development. You're out there in the community, you hear concerns, you bring it back to staff. Public Works is going to spearhead infrastructure improvements. PD is going to work on our safety. Community Services, Library, they address the quality of life and services to the community. And finance and city clerk, everybody plays a supportive role to some degree. So everybody is part of the team, and we appreciate that. But second, we also need to have a financial commitment. And so we are requesting tonight an increase in funding for economic development to help implement some of the programs that we went ahead and identified. And a financial commitment is going to build credibility and trust. It's going to help drive economic growth, create jobs and opportunity, which in turn provide for long-term sustainability. So the ask tonight is for $1 million for economic development. San Jose property sale is anticipated to net $4 million to the city. A portion of those proceeds, or $1 million, is requested to provide increased funding towards economic development. It is mentioned in the report. I don't think I've mentioned it yet, but sales tax generates approximately $21 million per year. That's from sales taxes, including Measure E. So $1 million is about 5%, and that's just a reinvestment back into economic development. Some of the programs that would fund would be the business loans, like we mentioned. And I kind of just did a breakdown here, but this is just very preliminary. Anything that we did create, we would have to develop the terms for the program, and then we'd come back to council just to run it by you and make sure you approve of those. So part of the plan is also key performance indicators, monitoring the progress and the success of the plan. And so we went ahead and identified a few, just number of businesses assisted annually. That might be new business startups, networking opportunities, helping them navigate regulations for the city. So we put down 100 businesses we would assist annually. We would monitor the commercial vacancy rate, make sure we keep it 4.4, try to reduce that, but that is still a healthy rate. So we would be happy to keep it and maintain it at that level. How many new developments with the Economic Development Division directly assist? We put 4 down there, and then monitor the strategic areas and continue to interact with the property owners within those areas. And again, the key performance indicators are going to offer a comprehensive assessment of the impact and effectiveness of the Economic Action Plan. So in summary, the Economic Action Plan is a comprehensive strategy for driving economic growth, sustaining the city's economic vitality. Funding is going to be critical to some of the strategies that we listed in here, and it's a dynamic and evolving document. So we will try to continue, or we will, I won't say try, we will continue to update that, and we will update it next to align and coincide following the next city strategic plan. And with that, I will conclude my report, and the recommendation is to adopt the Economic Action Plan and authorize a supplemental appropriation in the amount of $1 million from the general fund for one-time revenue received from the San Jose. And with that, I'll conclude my report and open it up to questions.
Valerie, thank you once again for an excellent report. We've been waiting a long time to hear this, and no, I mean seriously, this is
Busy.
this is a comprehensive expression of many of our thoughts. So, great job. Questions from anybody? Gary.
One comment, question, although I know you do this already, but I didn't see it spelled out in here, the importance of recognizing underutilized properties in town.
Yes.
You know, I know that's part of the plan and part of what you're doing. I just think it's important people know we're addressing that as well.
Correct, yes. It's lumped into our strategic areas, but yes, and we will identify others as well along those corridors. Correct.
Very good. Karen, anything?
We could probably drop that Mayflower name, because I think a lot of our city employees weren't even born when that was the Mayflower Market. So probably we could drop that. But no, I missed the service station that was at the corner of Foothill in Vermont. So I'm glad to see that made the list, the service station. But I think definitely, you know, in the top 5 things that residents continue to say is expanding services and having other places to dine and all of that. So I think this is great. And we have to have the housing in order to have the population, daytime population, to get the businesses, which people don't always see. So your funding source is a perfect segue, because with those new residents on the San Jose property, we'll get more businesses, and it all works together. Makes it very. So thank you.
That's a great point. On slide 7, there's 261 homes. That's a generic term for condos or single family homes, and another 39 that are in the queue, which would bring up 300 new homes. And I know that our schools are wanting to see that growth. And as Karen just said, people want to have more places to dine and shop, and more homes means that. So,
And there's a lot of information, so I didn't go through everything, but to your point, economic development it's multifaceted. It is going to include residential as well. And when you look at the general fund and the contributions and where the revenue is generated from, it's property taxes as well as your sales taxes that make a large majority of that.
David or Michael, anything?
Thank you. Wonderful work and a labor of love. Very good. I have a curiosity about the draw from the San Jose proceeds. See that stay at the Dale property direction. No objection to the investment in the plan. There's no hesitation there. Just which hand you take it out of, I guess, is academic, but my only thought. Thank you.
Yeah. Michael, anything?
Very nice, very impressive. Are you going to print that so we can hand it out to folks, or only on the website?
Was gonna have it on the website, but I can surely print you a few if you'd like.
It's just very impressive, and it's nice to be able to hand out to some folks as a color glossy, but it's up to staff. If they want to do this.
We'll
or
add
not.
that as a performance metric, how many we hand
That
out.
would be great. Um, Speaking of metrics, it hits all of my metrics that I've been wanting since I've been on council. You guys have done a great job in hitting those. To extend on what David just said on page 405, the example of the allocation of $1 million. When are you going to actually have a budget? Because you have an estimate, but you don't have an actual budget. And on top of that, I'll add to that as well, is we're not going to receive the San Jose funds for some time. So do you want a draw ahead of time before we receive the funds?
Well, we need to develop the programs, and we can't really put a lot of time into developing these programs unless we know the funding's available. So we can go ahead and start developing the programs, and then we'll, like I mentioned, we'll come back to council and we'll see where we're at. And as Councilmember Friedendahl mentioned, it's kind of all coming from the same pot. So, you know,
And
I
we're-
don't know if Adam wants to say it and help me out here, but
Yeah, no, I would just, on that front, so we used a portion of the Measure E proceeds to help fund the initial purchase of Dale that we talked about in Robust, right? Because homelessness was the #1 concern. And shortly after that is infrastructure, more places to eat and more places to shop and do everything else. And so essentially the Measure E money is both going to help Dale, and if council approves this construct, would also help approve 4 or 5 of the other key objectives that we achieve in all the community surveys. So, Mayor Pro Tem, you said it best. It's kind of all the same pot of money. We're just reutilizing it as many times as we can to get the biggest bang for our buck. Happy to come back with other options. And I think what's most important for us here is that we're not talking about ongoing funding that takes away from a service. We're talking about a one-time piece of funding that we hope through other initiatives and opportunities that we can continue to replace in that one-time pot of funding from a financial perspective. But I think the really key point is these programs all need to be developed with policies and guidelines and recommendations, and we need to share those with you. If we're going to start handing out hundreds of thousands of dollars, we need this council to bless those. And I think one of the things we've been appreciative, like the Parklet project, is that the council is engaged and understand kind of what goes into that. So as we work on that, we just need some assurances to let people know that there will be funding on the other side. So we have months of policy development in these programs before we come back. And so we will keep an eye on the San Jose property, but it is a potential opportunity for funding. If we have to look at a different source, we're happy to do that as well.
So from an accounting standpoint, you have different buckets of money. So will you pull from the Measure E to take this $1 million and then refill that bucket with the San Jose money?
I'll look at Marie, and Kyle back there. Oh, he crossed his knee. Maybe he has a dad joke for us this evening. So, essentially, the money would get deposited back from San Jose into a fund and gets reallocated from fund balance based on the city council's direction. So it's all kind of coming from like funding.
Yeah, the other part of that question was, when are you going to have a firm budget? Because you have an estimated budget per your report.
again, it's an estimate. We are going to go back and take a look. If council has any suggestions or anything they would like for us to keep in mind, this was just a rough estimate that I put together. If you wanted us to revise any of those numbers, we could, but we just wanted to give you something to chew on when we came to you tonight.
And the truth of the matter is if we go through and can establish these programs, we'll get an idea after the first year just how successful some are the other. Either we need new programs or we don't. This is a constant evaluation, reevaluation. What are we getting for that money? This is where a lot of the metrics come in handy here.
On the mechanics of the loan, business loans, is it going to be a simple interest? Any idea how you would do that on loaning and what the criteria would be?
Yeah, we wanted to make sure we had the funding available, then we'll go ahead and explore the different programs that we can go ahead and create. We haven't put any of the guidelines or how we're going to work this out yet.
I'll just
So show me the money first, right?
Well,
Gotta
I'll
have the
give you
money
an-
to start
yeah, An
working.
example is the city council may be willing to do a forgivable loan for a certain type of business if that's what you want to drive, like new dining establishments. So, and others could be the city's lay freight or the goal here is not for the city to make money on a business, but provide them a funding opportunity that may benefit them or will benefit them, and then we reap the rewards of those sales tax dollars coming back to us. So.
Mayor, I'm ready to make the motion on the recommendation, knowing that in the future that the policies and details will come back to us.
Thank you for that. I still have one more question. So on the beautification grant, can we take it from the art fund?
No.
No.
Okay, that's your question. The motion's been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Gary. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Would gladly. Councilmember Alves.
I guess.
Councilmember Boyer.
Yes.
Councilmember Davis.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Freedom.
Yes.
Mayor Thompson.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Valerie, thank you. You have been stellar up there, so thank you. Okay, we have two things left, and Bill, we're up against a time frame, self-imposed. Danny, so how much of a cushion do we have? Do we need a motion to extend past 10:30?
Yeah, you would need a motion if you
So
want.
is there a motion to?
So moved.
Second.
Second, do we need a actual roll call vote, or is there a consensus? Okay, so the pressure's off, Bill, but hurry up, okay?
Oh, no.
So, authorize the purchase of a 2024 Kenworth 1088 vacuum truck from Hacker Equipment Company based in Laverne in the amount of $734,769.95, including taxes and fees. It is yours, sir, to sell us.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor and Council. I recognize that I'm the only thing standing between you and adjournment, so I'll keep this as quick as I can. And basically, you handled most of the presentation for this. So yes, we are using a Sourcewell cooperative agreement to purchase this vehicle. As you mentioned, the vehicle manufacturer is in Laverne, so that is very convenient for us. They have saved a chassis for us, so they can start construction immediately once we get this approved tonight. So hopefully we can have delivery fairly soon. Commonly referred to as a Vactor truck. That really provides a lot of efficiencies for our staff and also makes it much easier for our staff to be out there protecting the infrastructure we talked about this evening. So just a couple of pictures here. You can see rather than using a traditional backhoe to dig into the ground and expose pipe or expose what we're trying to get to, the Vactor truck uses a jet of water and a large vacuum. So it actually rinses that dirt away and then sucks it out. So far less opportunity for us to create damage to the infrastructure or for any of our staff to get injured while they're out there working, because they're not using shovels, they're not down in the trench as much. They use the vehicle and that equipment for that. So in the interest of keeping it quick, that is all 4 slides that I had for this one. So recommendations above, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have regarding our Vactor truck.
Okay,
I make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
second. Madam Clerk, please. call the-
Councilmember Ellis.
Yes.
Councilmember Boyer.
Yes.
Councilmember Davis.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Freedom.
Yes.
Mayor Thompson.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thanks, Bill. We will move on to item 16 to authorize an expense in an amount not to exceed $950,000 per fiscal year 24-25 with LA County Public Works for routine maintenance, repair, and upgrades of city-owned traffic signals.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate that. And council, so tonight we are asking for the authority to spend up to that $950,000. So a little bit of background for everyone. In 1981, the city entered into an agreement with LA County to maintain several shared signals along Arrow and Branca. Back in 2022, the city council approved an expenditure in the amount of $213,000 with LA County to have the county take over our routine maintenance of our traffic signals. Just for information, we currently have 62 signals that we maintain. Prior to taking over the maintenance of the services, Los Angeles County assessed the condition of our city-owned traffic signals, and I have to tell you, it wasn't very good. Before they were even willing to take over the signals, we had to do $60,000 worth of upgrades just to get them to a point where they were willing to even take over the maintenance. So the scope of work, this really is a full service contract. So they do the routine maintenance, repairs, and upgrades of all of our city-owned traffic signals and related equipment. I'm going to skip the next 3 items because I'm going to talk about those in just a second on another slide. So expenditures, just kind of wanted to touch where we are on this with the expenditures. The amount needed for extraordinary maintenance was significantly underestimated in 2022. We knew we had some significant issues with our traffic signals, but we didn't really realize how bad they were. So in 2023, we had several major components that failed, and we found out that those components were not even available any longer and could no longer be maintained. So just as reference, we actually have cabinets that are still out there from the early to late 90s. So, and if you can imagine trying to operate a laptop from the 90s, you know the challenges that we're facing. On average, the last couple of years, just in the routine maintenance and repairs, we spent over $300,000. So expenditures continued here. The city service requests have been submitted to upgrade the traffic signal system at 6 locations and are mostly running in recall, and I'll have a map of those in just a second. Just for quick reference, recall means that's the complaints we get when somebody says, I'm sitting at the light, my light's red, that light's green, and there's nobody at the signal, and I'm having to wait for the whole thing to go through the cycle. So that's what recall is. We're trying to address that. The estimated cost for those 6 intersections is $492,000. That's for a new controller, new cabinet, new video detection, and new battery backup. So we will actually get into this century of technology for our traffic signal cabinets, and they should work much better than they are now and get us out of recall finally. So just real quick, here's the map for you so you can see where they're at. Foothill and Barranca. Also, we have them on 66 at Grand, at Glendora, at Lone Hill, and at Amelia, and then down on Lone Hill and Marketplace is where we'll be doing those upgrades. We have more planned because one thing we hear a lot is, I hate the way these traffic signals work, so we're really trying to get these upgraded. So I wanted to provide just a couple quick pictures because not everybody gets to see inside of a traffic signal cabinet, and it's so exciting we said it twice on the slide here. So inside the cabinet, you can see there's a controller, which is basically a computer system. There's all the video detection inputs. There's the battery backup and everything else that make those traffic signals work. I think it's probably far more complex and complicated than most people would understand. There's conflict monitors and everything else that go in there. So just wanted to provide a quick reference so you can see what the inside of a traffic signal cabinet looks like. Something similar to that? Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Little guy in there flipping a bunch of switches back and forth every time somebody pulls up to the intersection. Yeah.
Elsa's plugging in the phone line.
Right. So fiscal impact, I think, is really important to point out that we are not asking for any additional appropriations with this. This was actually approved in the 24-25 budget. So there is no additional funding that we need to come up with for this. And with that, I will get to our recommendation. That concludes my presentation. I am happy to answer any questions you might have, and we got through that in record time.
All right, thank you, Bill. Any questions for Bill? Michael?
Bill, you mentioned video. Are you going to have video synchronizing, or
Not
so
yet.
when you come to a light, it'll detect you instead of a loop?
So the video detection, exactly, it detects the vehicle, whether it's a vehicle, a bicycle, instead of having a loop in the ground, the camera will pick that up and then activate the call for service to get that light to go green.
So
We
that'll,
don't have any synchronization yet because we need to be able to have connections between the cabinets. We are working on that, but we're not there yet.
that will avoid you sitting at the light and you're the only one there and it has
Yep.
to go through a cycle.
It'll
Yeah,
be
exactly.
intersection by intersection, not an entire corridor.
Right.
The entire corridor would need something like fiber. A lot of the Wi-Fi just isn't as reliable enough to do it. While we're on the topic, Bill, can you just briefly touch why it is that Bennett and Grand on the right-hand turn?
Yes, so we've had a lot of questions come up about why there's no right turn on red at Bennett and Grand. As you get out there, you'll see that we have installed bicycle lanes in that area. One of the things that's kind of a new program that's gone out there, and there is no dedicated right turn lane. So if you're going westbound, you have the opportunity to either go straight or right. If there's someone on a bicycle in that area, we now have a vehicle-bicycle conflict, which means you could be on your bicycle, somebody wants to turn red, they're going to hit you in your bike. There's a large box, that green box, that protects the bicycle. So that's why if you're looking westbound, you cannot turn right on red. It's actually for the protection of whoever might be on a bicycle that's there. And that's why if you're coming eastbound, you don't have that no right turn on red because there's actually a dedicated right turn pocket.
How about the no right turn on Ada going north on Vermont? There's a red arrow there. No bike lane.
I would have to go back and look at that one. I'm assuming that one's probably a line of sight issue, when they realign that and with the traffic that's coming in there. that
And I would
get the
just
gap.
say, with every single intersection, I think one of the things that gets, that most people don't know is the city doesn't have control over intersections that are at grade crossing when the gold line went through. The CPUC approves all the design. So the CPUC, through the state of California is the one that approves the design for any at-grade crossing. So there are a host of challenges with those lights that we will continue to work through, but the city doesn't maintain local control of the design of those intersections.
Thank you, Gold Line.
It is also why Granite Foothill takes so long. So you have a at-grade freight train and above ground electric train, and you have lots of different movements and lots of different pedestrian movements, and that intersection was a design and approved by the CPUC and operates as intended. So
We also have a ton of line of sight issues out there.
yeah,
Which makes it even more difficult to get that intersection timed.
I'll move recommendation 1.
Okay, second?
Second.
Second, Karen, all right. Moved and seconded by Michael and Karen. Please read the roll.
Councilmember Ellis?
Yes.
Councilmember Boyer?
Yes.
Councilmember Davis?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Friedenthal?
Yes.
Mayor Thompson?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Okay, thank you. Wow, we've done a lot of work. We've been off for 6 weeks, but tonight has made up for it. Thank you for everybody being here and for the good exchange that we've had. Huh? Well, we were supposed to be off, but we weren't. So, any member statements to close with?
I'd like to thank staff profusely for the weeks of hard work to get us to tonight. Thank
Hmm.
you.
Very
And
good.
The yeomanship today of the overtime somebody's were putting in.
Exactly. Thank you. I would echo that. And as we previously stated, at the start of our meeting, we're closing tonight in memory of 3 folks, Sandra, Dave, and Warner. And we thank them for their life and engagement and everything that they meant to people that live here and the city itself. So in memory of them, we are going to close for them. Adam or Danny, anything else? Okay, we will adjourn this meeting at 10:36. Thank you.